We're here early.
We're a little early, guys, because we're going to let somebody come on and promote an event. So we decided to come on a little early. At 9, of course, we will be talking with Keaton and Russ.
Hello!
Oh, okay. All right. Is Mario out there? Hello! La, la, la. You kind of killed it just from coming on and saying we're a little early. It threw me off my whole vibe. And I just realized I still have the things in my hair that hold it back. All right.
Your hair's terrible.
My hair's terrible. I know. Well, I usually have those things up and then we go live and sometimes I forget they're in there. Like I'll be like the lady sitting here with like curlers in my hair one day. So, yeah. So there's been some interesting things afoot. I was watching some of that. What's his name? Schultz.
Well, I brought him on
What's
today,
that?
and I was going to tell him that he was not a good guy. He's very dishonest, and unfortunately, he decided that
Howard. That's his name, Howard.
He thinks he's gonna get away with union busting. Not on my watch.
And the thing is that he knows the truth, which is that nothing's really going to happen. What they're going to do? They'll get a slap on the wrist. Maybe he'll get a fine.
No, we'll talk about it.
He could wipe his ass with
Russell. But the truth is that Schultz said exactly what he needed to say. We didn't break the law. And guess what? Even though what they did was clearly union busting, because labor laws have been completely decimated.
How do they figure they didn't, though, when the administrative judge found that they did? So that's like coming out of a courtroom when you have a verdict that says guilty and then saying, yeah, but I'm not guilty.
Yeah, but once it gets to the Supreme Court, nothing's going to happen. And that's basically.
Well, and it wouldn't matter anyway. People, when you get to that level of wealth, I just think you're just completely.
Either you stop shopping at Starbucks or it's not going to matter.
I can honestly say that I could probably count the amount of money I've spent in Starbucks in my lifetime. Like, has got to be under $50. All
right. Well, we're pressed for time, so let's not waste. We will talk more about this when we are on the main show shortly. But in the meantime, Jen has a very unique ability to connect with the Gen Z population.
Because really, I'm like them in my head.
Yeah.
I do. I look in the mirror and I'm like, what the? But like, I feel like I'm like them in my head.
Well, the Miami-Dade Young Dems have a plethora of good people. And one of them happens to be Evan Gerson, who is really taking a shining to Jen as she has taken a shining to him.
Yeah, you know.
Evan, welcome to Generational Change.
Hey, guys.
Hey, how are you?
Doing well. So I'm blown away by that Bernie Sanders accent.
I'm grateful for the youth that want to come on here and support our cause, and you are always welcome. Your support is very much appreciated.
Tell me that if he didn't call you with that you wouldn't over the phone. Like he's done some of his voices when we're on the phone, and it's really like it sounds real.
I got my fingerprints done when I was getting my real estate license a couple of years ago, and the lady who was helping me was when I say a diehard Trump supporter, I mean like a diehard Trump supporter. I mean, we are in Florida. And so what ended up happening was she couldn't believe that I was totally able to convince her that she was talking to the president of the United States. And so what she did, I'm not kidding, she called a friend, literally, put her on speakerphone, and she said, just talk like Trump. She said, this is really great to meet you. It's really good. The woman sounded like she was going to cry.
See,
Mr. President, I love
and he
you
has
so
the
much.
mask. So like when he gets into it, because he has the mask.
You are the person who's totally making America great again. And we're appreciative. We're very appreciative. And she totally bought it. She really thought I was Trump. That's one of my favorite experiences, was her like literally was convinced that she was talking to the president. Just some random chance that the president is going to walk into a, what is it? What's the place called again? Where you get your fingerprints done? A notary.
Well, you get your fingerprints at a lot of places. One of them's a police station.
Well, it was not a police station.
Okay, I'm just saying.
Totally you're totally not arresting me. That's never happened.
I'm just saying.
But it was like, it was a notary office, and that was pretty interesting. But I always say that if I have to convince the ladies to listen to our show, just remember, I am responsible for all of the terrible policies that have come about over the last 25 years. But the ladies still love me because I put on the Clinton charm, and that's that.
Oh my God!
Isn't that good?
Yeah, that's. Who I don't remember his name. He does social media. He did an impression of, I mean, he's done pretty much everyone. He went on and he did basically he debated Ron DeSantis and Trump with the voices. I mean, I want to learn how to do that because I have a ton of international friends. Like I have a friend in Scotland, and I'll find myself talking to him, and they'll try and get into his voice, but it's not. It's like a very.
Don't do it. You always sound like the guy from Lucky Charms.
Who are you talking about?
When you start to do like the Scottish or Irish accents.
Oh, well, I'm not doing that right now.
So
but let's talk. We don't have time.
Yeah,
So let's
talk
Okay,
about
yeah.
this event, Evan. So guys, I met Evan at an event over the weekend where Maxwell Frost was down here and did a nice little chat. So Evan works with the Young Dems in Miami-Dade, and talk a little bit about this event and who can come and all that.
All right. So my name is Evan. I'm a student organizer who's been pretty active in politics. I think it's so important that Gen Z gets involved in politics. We're the most loud generation. We have the ability to connect through people through social media. Connected. I mentioned I have international friends. The fact that we're able to do that, we were raised in that. I mean, it just attests to the voices we have and the power we have to make change. So I'm working with some fellow students from my school and from across the state to create an event for AP African American Studies. So I personally have taken a number of AP courses, and I think it's something that's so important that guides your entire academic career, be it from high school to college, from college to law school, to med school, to any sort of further education. And I think AP African American Studies is something that's so necessary, not only to provide further academic opportunity, to get people invested in AP and higher education itself, to take further APs, to just embrace a love of learning, but to create a wiser future generation. So I'm working with these fellow students, friends from school, friends from a governmental program called Boys State, just kids who are passionate about this, who want to make this kind of change. And we're putting on a speaker series in Coconut Grove at the Macedonia Missionary Baptist Church, one of the most historic churches in South Florida. And it's April 8th, 1 to 3 p.m. We're going to feature a number of speakers from our community, a lot of which are students. One of my personal goals is to get students out there, get their voices out. And I want kids to go up there on stage, to just go in front of people and say, hi, my name is so-and-so. This is my story. This is what I want to do. And this is what I want to say. This is why I support this cause. This is why I think, even if it's a college student, if I could go back and take this could have this sort of profound impact. I want to share people's stories. And we're hoping to have a number of political figures, hoping for Rep. Driscoll, who seems to be somewhat of a possibility. I've been talking to Chevron Jones's staff.
I was going to say, this seems like Chev would be very supportive of this.
Yeah. And it was so funny because at the Frost event, that's where I first met him. And I've always been a fan of him. He's, oh my God, he's a sweetheart. He's such a nice guy. And I only found out he was a former AP chemistry teacher. And he said he got involved because of the fact that COVID, his honors class, I believe, or CP class was behind a year. And it just attested to the fact that there are problems in our current education system. Now, I do have to admit, I am wearing a Florida versus all y'all t-shirt. And I'm pretty invested in the college decision process.
All right, so guys, definitely show up at this. You know what? I think we'll have to will you drive?
To Coconut Grove?
Yeah.
Well, I won't be here. So
where are you going to be?
I'll be in New Jersey.
Oh, okay. Well, I didn't know this, but yeah, he'll be home. So yeah, I definitely would like to go and meet the people that are involved in this. I think it's really important. This actually sounds like the kind of thing we're trying to do on the Gen Z report. And this is the kind of thing that going forward, I think we should cover on the Gen Z report. Like, it'd be good that maybe, I don't know, we'll see, maybe if one of the guys can come down there. But thank you so much for coming on and sharing this. And we will keep promoting it on social media. And guys, you might be able to see Evan coming up on the Gen Z report. I'm going to run it by the team tomorrow. And I think we can initiate him into, we're very cliquey, Evan. We're very cliquey that way.
Yeah, not really.
No. We like everybody. So, yeah. So guys, check out this event, be supportive of the kids. If you're in the area, show up for this. And they definitely need mentoring. That's where we need to help this happen. So thank you so much, Evan, for sharing this with us and coming on and chatting.
Of course, anything. We need to get Gen Z involved. And, if that means I have to do a subpar Irish or other accent on the Gen Z podcast, I might just have to.
Let me assure you, the only Irish one here is me, Peter Grant Hager. So you must understand, you cannot impersonate an Irishman. You are either Irish or you're not.
you're partially.
That's right. I am partially the good part anyway.
The other half is tribe.
Yeah. I have to work around that.
Thank you, Evan. Guys, so we'll talk more about this coming up at April 8th, 1 to 3, down in Coconut Grove. We need to talk about this. We've talked about this on the show, but yeah, it's important. These kids are the ones who are losing out. So thanks for coming on, Evan. We'll talk, you and I.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Bye,
Guys,
sweetie.
brother, have a great evening.
He's so cute.
So you've definitely done yourself well.
Well, you know what
getting
it is?
this
It's so
kid.
funny because like other people's kids like me and think I'm cool, even though my kids don't like me and think I'm cool. It's so funny. So I almost get to like be the cool mom to other people's kids. That's what I feel like, that it allows me to be that because I don't have to discipline these people. These are other people's problems. So what is it? What did Joe do? What did he do?
What Joe didn't do, I think, is more of the question. Joe
hasn't done much.
No, he's broken his promises, but no, come on, man, I don't know anything. No, but we're going to talk about a lot of different things. Obviously, we're going to talk about the senator from Vermont and what he had to say to Howard Schultz, because that's important.
Can I say fuck Howard Schultz? God, that guy.
Well,
douchebag.
We've been demonetized 10 times over, thanks to you now.
We were demonetized when I sat down this morning.
Yeah, you know, it's amazing. We're pushing 12,000 subscribers now, and yet for some reason we can only get 11 people to turn out initially for our live stream. I wonder, are we possibly shadow banned?
I still am not
know.
completely sure that that's a real thing.
I think it must be.
I don't
because
know.
Clearly, if we're doing so well with our clips and our shorts, and yet the live stream.
Because what are we competing against at this time? I don't know.
But
There's probably cooler people on. Tim
Well,
Pool's on. I don't know.
Katie Halper, I think, is on.
Well,
right now.
look, Katie people are our people.
Yeah, I mean, look, if people are live, they're live. But I don't know. Keaton and Russell are going to have to give us a little bit of insider information regarding what they do so spectacularly that we don't, because they're live.
Well, the one thing they did spectacularly lately was that ridiculous Hillary thing. No, I can't. No, but they did, like, it was hard enough for me. Like, I don't know that I could have stomached it if there wasn't like other people covering it, because otherwise I can't watch her. I can't watch her. I find her just completely insufferable.
Well, I don't think that there is anything worth actually watching when it comes to her, because most, if not everything that she talks about is just complete, hogwash. Although, of course, Keaton and Russell did a really great job.
Yeah, guys, if you don't know, Hillary is going to be teaching foreign policy
at Columbia University.
Yeah.
Because, of course, she's going to teach at a place that's about a 15-minute drive from her palatial palace.
That's so not the point.
No, it's
that
an Ivy school.
First of all, she should be in prison. Okay. Much of which for foreign policy. So I just find it incredibly ironic that she's going to be teaching. Honestly, I'm in the bizarro world. All right, let's get this going, man.
Yeah. Well, we are early, but
are
that's
we? Okay. We're a
that's
little early.
Never,
okay.
That's never a bad thing.
No, it's just very atypical when we're early. But yeah, this is race.
Yeah, this is going to be interesting.
Wow. Wisconsin's Supreme Court race.
Yeah, because this lady who's running is supposedly going to do away with, it's going to be a couple things, but obviously the Wisconsin is, while it is a split state, it is a swing state. I mean, we could be honest about what it really is.
It's a populist state.
It is a very populist state. It's libertarian and progressive. But
Yeah.
The point is, the maps in Wisconsin are almost as bad as how they gerrymandered Ohio, how they gerrymandered New York, and it works both ways. It doesn't. The maps in this state are ridiculous.
They really are.
But again, the goal is to just avoid having competitive races, and
the goal is to keep incumbents where they are.
Yes,
period.
That is,
and all the incumbents kind of work together. Their parties are irrelevant. They all have each other's backs to sit where they are. It doesn't matter what party they're in.
I'm not going to share that information, Keaton. We'll just keep it to ourselves. But thank you. That's important. We'll see if that actually matters. That this is apparently keys to the with our live stream. You don't do it anymore.
Really?
We just have a regular banner. Well, we should test it out. See if that makes a difference.
I used to do them. I used to spend so much time doing graphics, and I felt like nobody appreciated them. And then I just was like, screw it.
The only thing that matters is the eyeballs coming on. So don't, most people don't
I'm
read
so
headlines. Just to see
tired
an
of critiques
individual.
about my thumbnails. It's like, God damn it, man. These
We have
thumbnails
this
aren't good
big of
either.
an
right?
audience, and it's complete. Listen, it'd be one thing if our channel wasn't engaged at all, but the shorts are engaging, the clips are engaging.
We're very engaging.
But not the live stream. So start making the clips again in the live stream, please.
Fine.
You know them from Dissidence. They are doing an excellent job of reporting the news without being sellouts, shills, and all those wonderful things. Yeah, that's a good one. Well, listen, I definitely did that today, and we're going to talk about it, but I did a really good job, and you guys are going to hear more about it. Keaton and Russell from Dissidence, welcome to Generational Change again.
What up?
guys?
Hey, it's good to see you guys. I was cracking up watching you guys covering that ridiculous Hillary story. It was so funny. That ad is I actually thought when I see things like that, it almost feels like it's The Onion.
She really comes off as somebody who is so devoid of any genuine emotion or feeling. She hates the common people like with a burning passion.
I feel like she's like a lizard. She's like a pod person.
Well, yeah, that's how these theories take hold. I had
Well,
to
she-
watch
I'm
it.
joking about that.
I had to watch it a few times before we went live with it so that I wouldn't just laugh through the whole thing. Because the first couple times I watched it, I just broke up. And I'm like, I have to watch it a few more times to get this out of my system. I still cracked a little bit when we watched it.
I thank you
thought-
for that because I couldn't.
I thought about taking a screenshot of the text exchange we had because he sent it to me. I watched it and I texted him back. I will never forgive you for sending that to me.
That's a one-time view. You can't go more than one view on that shot. It's just too much.
Where did they put that? Where was that? Because it didn't come up on any of my feeds.
They tweeted it out. I don't know why I'm on Columbia's radar. I'm the last guy who I would think would be on their radar, but for some reason it came up.
Because you needed to see it. Somebody needs to fall on that sword for the rest of us and know that that's out there in the world. I'm not sure why.
Maybe someone
help
quote
those kids
tweeted
in
it to make
Colombia.
fun of it or something, and that was someone I follow. I don't know, but it came across my radar, and I'm like, man, this is just too good not to.
I
But
mean,
here's
what
the
is
best,
great about
Russell
this?
wanting to go down there and talk to them.
That's what I was just
That
going to
was-
say.
Yeah.
I'm right in the neighborhood. I am on it. I am like Kolchak. I am going over there and getting to the bottom of this story.
Because I cannot imagine that there are that many kids that age that are not somewhat aware as to the actual situation with that woman.
I will be fascinated to see what I'm really doing this.
No, you should.
I'm going to
am
do
very
this in the
curious.
next couple of weeks. I'm going down there. And then when the classes start, I'll go back again. But right now, I'm going to just go to the Columbia campus and ask people. I'm curious, like, what's their initial reaction to that?
Yeah. And what the percentage is. Like, okay, maybe you get a couple of like Dem sycophants somewhere in there. Like, if only we had voted for Hillary, everything would be fine. But I would think for the most part, not.
I don't agree.
You
Not
think
from
the
my
other way.
experience of Ivy League students. My experience of Ivy League students is they are fucking dumb as dog shit. Like if you want to find out why the country is in the mess that it's in, go to an Ivy League campus and talk to these people. These are the ones who are going to be running things.
Dumb. I mean, I don't think dumb versus smart versus just Hillary not being popular. That's more what I'm like. I'm not saying that I think Ivy League kids are particularly, special, but I just think in general that generation, that she's not necessarily that popular.
I think it's also a reflection of where a lot of the kids are coming from. Remember,
They are
the
privileged.
the student base.
Well, and that's why she's popular with them. That's where I'm saying, no, I don't think so. You're going to go over there and you're going to get that contingent of people who are like, she should have been president. It's terrible. Jill Stein. That's what you're going to get from those kids. Maybe I'll be pleasantly surprised.
No, I want to know. And when you do that, this will definitely be a good follow-up because I am very curious what that and the demographics of who says what will also be very
You have
interesting.
to remember that it has a lot to do with that. I mean, the student body that you're going to also find at NYU is going to be very similar. Whereas the student body that you're going to find at Hunter College, at St. John's, and maybe even Fordham is going to have a completely different attitude about Hillary Clinton. The ones that come from extremely privileged backgrounds, whether in Manhattan, whether in Brooklyn, whether in Westchester or Rockland County, their whole disposition about life is that even if they were born into this privilege, they're somehow, it's somehow benevolent of them to actually, have this attitude that we deserve this shit. We deserve to be on the high horse.
They think that they're in a meritocracy.
Yeah, we're blue bloods.
Right.
And that is the one thing you can tell with Hillary is that she doesn't hide her resentment for the common people. She really hates average people.
All the counties that were most productive, that were most economically dynamic, they all voted for me.
That's
Keaton said that.
But Keaton, get in here. I mean, that's a mask off moment. That's Hillary basically saying, yeah, I do hate you. I just want your vote. Now listen, good child, and vote for me because, as Debbie Wasserman Schultz also likes to say, I know what's best for everybody. They can hate me all they want, but I know what's best.
Yeah, I mean, my expectation is that when Russ interviews students, especially when the semester starts and he'll get to interview people who are actually taking the course, my guess is when confronted about her abysmal foreign policy record, their answer will be something like what every other Democrat says when they are confronted on her record. Yeah, she's not perfect. She made some mistakes, but she's still one of the most accomplished people in America, and it's an honor to learn from her because she's the most qualified candidate ever to run for president. They'll just pivot to that. That's what I said in the video. They admire Hillary because she represents the pursuit of power. That is all they admire her for. The record doesn't really matter to them. It doesn't really factor in. They admire her because she's a queen. I lived in Brooklyn during the 2016 campaign. They had literal graffiti of her face and Yas Queen under. That's all that matters, is that she represents pursuit of power.
Why do you tell me these things?
She's a woman who
miserable drunk. Stop it.
At the throne, and that's all they care about. That's all these people care about. I don't think it's that they don't know. I think it's that they don't care.
This is the important part, Russell. You will need to distinguish between the groups of people that chose to take that class versus kids that just happen to be at that school. Like, you very well could get much more sycophantic people to that would choose to take that think that would be worthwhile. Whereas there could be students there that think, oh my God, she should be in prison.
Yeah, see, I don't think that's going to be the preponderance of people.
That makes me so sad.
I think it's going to be 8 or 9 out of 10, if not even higher. Like, it's going to be such. I will be amazed to be wrong about this.
I'm so sad.
When I have debated Ivy League people about politics, they are the scum of the earth. The only people who are worse than they are artists. They're the absolute bottom scum. Just absolute scum. The one notch above them are Ivy Leaguers. I have never experienced such, just because of their privileges, as impenetrable as your typical liberal is. They are bulletproof, man. You can show them maps, charts, diagrams, play recordings. You could show them Hillary Clinton literally whacking a Honduran with an automatic sidearm. And no. Well, that was probably the situation. It was probably the situation she was in. She probably didn't have a choice. And even if she made a mistake, well, nobody could have made a better choice in that situation. You've never been in that situation. They are completely impenetrable because, as you both were saying, they're being trained to be in the leadership class. They're being trained to be in the ruling class. Being right is beside the point. Being right according to elites is the point. And if you're in a society that's coming apart, where your elites are increasingly corrupted and have no real connection anymore to basing their decisions on meaningfully trying to benefit society with those decisions, then if you're being trained to think like them, you're being trained to think badly. You're being trained to be fundamentally stupid for the benefit of your career. That's what you're going to find on an Ivy League campus.
I think you're bringing up a very important point, because we see a lot of things that happen in general in the political sphere, and we're looking at it in a completely objective way to say, this doesn't make any sense. Like, everyone thinks that there's like this bubble that people live in when they're on the hill, for example. And the way I see it, they all know the score, but their career comes first. And if it means that they have to make a complete fool of themselves in the process by acting like they don't know that Russiagate was a hoax, that they don't know that all war is bullshit and it can be ended tomorrow, but it's all about natural resources and how much we can take advantage of working people, not just in this country, but around the world. So much of this is just such obvious shit, but they're not going to say it because once you're in that life, it's pretty damn intoxicating to have 8 full-time assistants.
But it's also not. I want to add this because I think this is important. Sorry, go ahead, Jen.
No, I was just going to say, this is why it's like I am so obsessive about getting in with the Gen Z kids. I feel like this is where we need to really be creating a revolution with them. It really upsets me to think that people that are young, I don't know, it bothers me. And I think that it's really disturbing. And so I am going to try to co-opt as many of those kids as I can. That's all I'm saying. And he'll tell you, like they kind of leech onto me, and I will take these kids and I'm leading an army of a revolution. And so
she's at least well-intended. It's not like she's leading them into the deep forest and is going to throw them into a big pile of mushroom.
And I heard myself the other day. I'm like, every
he thinks thou dost protest too much.
I pick up these kids. I realize how that sounds, but like I'm going to create an army that's going to have to fight against these Columbia people then.
Yeah, but the Columbia people and all of these like shallow careerist libs, we like to make a caricature of them as, rubbing their hands together, knowing that they're lying to themselves and to everybody else, but they're making out well. And so we got a nice little scam going. It's not that conscious for so many of them. It's like not most people who go to church, but there are a lot of people who go to church every Sunday as a matter of ritual who, if you really sit them down and force them to tell the truth, they're like, yeah, I don't really believe Jesus actually rose from the dead, but this is my thing. This is where I go. This is my crowd, right? I take the communion. I go through the ritual. It's just a social ritual that I go through. And to a lot of these type people, that sort of center-left politics is church to a marginally religious person, right? It's a ritual. It's what they do. It's how they live, right? A lot of it's what they do for a living. And then obviously you meet people at work and you go out to, after work for a beer on Friday, whatever. It's that to them. It's
the most important part is it's how they gain their position. And it's how they maintain their position, right? They have got to parrot this way of looking at the world to get the nice McKinsey job that leads to the nice Goldman Sachs job that leads to the nice multi-million-dollar income, maybe go to government to build the resume a little bit, then go sit on a board of directors. If you want that kind of life, you got to accept this worldview from very early on. As soon as you start to speak out on that, it's like they live. We've got one who can see. They can't.
That's a really great movie, by the way, for anybody who hasn't seen it. I mean,
we should cover that for the film club.
Yeah, absolutely.
The fight scene lasted a little too long, but overall, the whole mess. I mean, listen,
I'm not sure what movie you're talking about.
They justify it.
I don't see that.
No, that's a great film.
Isn't that a
never saw
movie?
They Live?
Not really.
Is
not
it
really
like
scary? No,
it's kind of like if Rod Serling.
That's what I was just gonna say. It's like a Twilight
Zone. He collaborated with like Marshall McLuhan on a movie.
Yeah, I don't know. It sounds like a guy thing to me. John Carpenter. Like, I don't know.
Do yourself a favor and just trust us guys for once.
No, every time I've seen a movie that a bunch of guys recommend, I always think it's stupid.
Hold on a minute. Hold on a minute. You are an 80s wrestling fan.
Yeah, but that was more because it was something I did because me and my dad did that.
So Roddy Piper.
I met him and Hulk Hogan and
he's the lead of that movie.
He's the star of the movie.
But that doesn't, I don't know. All right, I'll think about it. But that's what we're talking about, but it's not as a professional wrestling thing. It's a I don't know.
Listen, Jen, this is a movie.
Okay.
Where it turns out that all of the elites are aliens who are subliminally programming everybody. And Roddy Piper gets glasses that allows him to see the programming. So he holds up the money to his face. It says, "This is your God." Okay. He holds up a magazine. It says, "Consume." sleep 8 hours, work 8 hours. Like, it's great. It's great. It's
obey is the
obey.
Right. That's the big one.
Because that's the big billboard.
Right. That's the iconic image.
Obey.
Yeah.
And but that is what they do. They obey. And there are people who will not question it, even if deep in their soul they know it's wrong. And we're dealing with something like that down here. Because let's just put it this way. We never name names, but the Empress has no clothes. And there's a lot of people who are starting to come around to that fact, even though they will not say it publicly, because fear of retribution, even something at a local level, there is this fear of, well, how do we get out from under this hell that we've been living in for so long? Well, one of those people who has considerable influence has had enough of it and went so far as to just basically say that depending on what happens in the future, I will not be afraid to stand up to her. And that says a lot. Eventually,
are we talking about Debbie Wasserman?
We are talking about.
He can't help himself.
I was going to say, do you want to put in the private chat who the fuck you're talking about so that
he just assumes everyone knows what he's thinking. We all have to just know what's going on.
I'm actually pretty good at subliminal messaging, so I guess
I think that was what it was, but I wasn't sure. Yeah,
I just think it's kind of like the photo in Paris from, there must have been how many people? A couple 100,000 that were in the street.
Oh, the yellow vest.
And so
now.
Well, this one right now, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you're thinking about how do you make the impact in this country, and you think about what are the things that it's going to take in order to get change done. And when everyone's out there talking about George Floyd or talking about some event where a lot of people are marching in the street, the fact of the matter is 99% of the population, while wanting some type of police reform, which was what the whole George Floyd protests are about, that is not going to dictate whether or not you can put food on your plate, whether or not you have health care, whether or not you have real economic opportunity, like and we'll get to obviously what happened today with Bernie and Howard Schultz. If we had a couple 100,000 people march on Washington specifically for the purpose of universal health care, then something would happen. That's the truth. But
I mean, I think it would take more than a march. I think it would take the kind of action that you're seeing in France now. It would take mass resistance, civil and sometimes uncivil disobedience, right?
But they have social safety nets in place so that they can afford to do that. Like places like that can have a general strike because they have healthcare anyway. They don't need their job for their healthcare. Like there's a lot of things in those countries that have that sort of safety, and they also prioritize workers. Even at the countries that they're protest, it's still better than it is in terms of how we allow our workers to be treated here.
Well, this clip, I don't know why this clip, because it wasn't really groundbreaking. It was just kind of a summation of a certain left thinking over the last few years. But Glenn Greenwald and Russell Brand had this clip where Glenn basically said, and I've said this on the show, not as eloquently as he did, but I've said this in the past, that the elites have two choices. You throw enough crumbs to the people to keep them from revolting, or you say, fuck it, they're going to revolt anyway, and you invest in suppressing the population. And he's arguing they've chosen suppressing the population rather than to provide for the population. I don't know why that particular clip set people off, but ever since that clip came out, I mean, maybe it's a psyop, probably is, but I have seen so much about Russell Brand is a right winger ever since that clip dropped. I know it's not the first wave of that, but this is like the second major push to convince people that Russell Brand is a dangerous right-wing threat.
It
happened when that clip dropped.
I've been watching him for years, and as somebody who is, I consider myself fairly left. I don't find him right-wing at all. So I don't know what it is that people, it's like.
Because he's communicating with people that you're not supposed to communicate
with. No, it isn't just that. It isn't just that. They actually think that things that he says and things that he's talked about indicate a right-wing lean. And I completely disagree. I think that they don't recognize an actual leftist. Like, it's almost like he's he doesn't have a problem with the idea of open borders. Like, this is not a right-wing authoritarian person in any way. And I just think that that's very interesting.
Well, go ahead. Keaton.
No, go ahead.
Well, they project their own behavior onto their enemies. You know, it's what Wasserman Schultz was doing to Tybee. Right? Oh, yeah. Tyebee's not legitimate. Tybee, this is somebody who got removed from the chair of the DNC, which, you know, to get in trouble for corruption in that job, that's like getting a ticket at the Indianapolis 500. How corrupt do you have to be before you get called out for corruption in that position?
You're too corrupt for the Democrats, even.
You know. We are extremely grateful that we were able to get Matt on, and clearly, you know, the one thing Debbie is, we have always said about Debbie for many years is that she is the gift that keeps on giving. And we mean that in the sense of whenever she thinks that it's her opportunity to make a big splash in politics, she ends up pissing off the wrong people. And when you piss off somebody like Matt Taibbi, who is really connected politically and really understands what it means to make the wrong political enemy, well, he comes on our show and we put out obviously a handful of clips. Now, we had the most successful clip we've ever done in the history of this podcast, which is just about 2.5 years old.
Yeah, I saw that.
We've gotten over 130,000 views.
Crazy.
But what's most interesting about the clip is the comments. See, paying attention to what the people, and the one thing you guys can probably agree on when it comes to the actual mindset of the average person, YouTube comments are generally the best. You are going to find that people are very direct about what they think. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, not as much.
But you realize that she like when we had him on, and I knew she would have what I call her Marsha moments with me. Mm-hmm. And I know that I poke that. Like, I know that I do. And I always expect the repercussion. And the other day I remember saying there's going to be repercussion for this. And I now just realize what it is in my head.
Yeah.
And there has now been locally a reprisal for me having Matt Taibbi on the show. Like, there's just certain things that go on that I just know are like her having, like, basically, I'll show you. And this is now something else that just happened that now I can tie to this.
The overwhelming majority, I would say probably close to 90+% of the comments were extremely positive. Mm-hmm. Even if they don't necessarily agree with Taibbi, they definitely agree that the idea that the Democrats for a second thought that it was wise to have Wasserman Schultz as any type of a spokesperson in any capacity for the party is an
unethics.
It's like political suicide. And the few people that would come on and say that they support Wasserman Schultz are more or less the exact type of person that you're talking about, Russ. That is exactly who they are. They are that person that is part of that crowd. And one of them who made this comment about, oh, Debbie really owned Taibbi. Well, you know what the beautiful thing is?
Well, the Majority Report, they did a whole segment about that.
Listen, we love Mikey. And I talked to him in private.
He's talking about Sam.
No, did you say the Majority Report?
Yeah.
I'm thinking
No, he's talking about Sam. I didn't watch it because I just can't.
Sam has been on our show a handful of times.
And I like Sam.
He absolutely supports Jen. He cannot stand Wasserman Schultz. But there's this crowd there's an audience you build that you feel you have to play to. And that's the thing about any business where I think it's ridiculous.
Yeah, I was like a little surprised that Mike Figueredo even said.
Well, Mikey and I, like I said, I talked with him privately. And that was a conversation where I even said to him that this is, you're not serving any purpose by doing this. And he got it. And it's like, yeah, they want the clicks and all that. But again, your hatred of Elon Musk should have nothing to do with recognizing that Debbie Wasserman Schultz should be the bane of everyone's existence in left politics. Everybody.
So wait,
and your hatred of Elon Musk should have nothing to do with how you feel about the Twitter files.
I can't stand Elon Musk. I can't stand Elon Musk, and I get this. Like,
well, see, this is why you guys get some of those people on your comments, which is not a knock, but I'm just saying, like, we didn't get anybody. Like, I don't think we had anybody. Like, 1 or 2 people in like the 10 clips that we posted. Because probably it has to do with the fact that you're a little more tuned into Democratic Party politics because you ran a primary within the campaign. So, like, you still have some stragglers in your audience, present company excluded, I hope. But right? I mean, I think that's a function of that. I mean, like I said, I'm not saying it as a knock on you. You know, I think you did a noble thing by trying to primary her out. But I think the fact that you still have people whose ultimate loyalty is to the party could explain some of that. No.
Well, if you look at what I was
it's also because we're here. We're in her district.
That's true. And what you will also
that's true too.
That with some of the people who comment, you can look on their feed very briefly. It will show you what channels they're subscribed to. So if the channels they're subscribed to are, let's say, Midas Touch, ABC News, things like that, then chances are I can't actually have a rational conversation with a person like that. It's just not possible.
Yeah, but this is why this goes back to the Russell Brand thing. This is why they smear Russell Brand as right wing. These are the same kinds of people who would smear Brand as right wing, who would say that Debbie Wasserman Schultz owned Matt Taibbi,
and that she's left.
Yeah, right.
And that she's to Taibbi's left.
Right. Exactly. It's that same type of person there, which because what Russell Brand was getting at in one clip that I posted, this was a while back, but I just it jogged my memory today because somebody on Twitter replied to a tweet that I sent a couple weeks ago talking about Russell Brand, where Russell Brand was talking about how all the anti-establishment fervor now is on the right because so much of the left has been co-opted. And so when he talks about there is more an anti-establishment right than an anti-establishment left, a lot of people, very stupidly, I think, take that as an endorsement of the right wing. Because if you want to be anti-establishment, your only choice is to be on the right. Whereas what it really was a lament. It's really too bad that there's not much of an anti-establishment left anymore. Like you guys, when you guys sat in and hosted our show while Russ was off, we did a segment on the More Perfect Union where we played the interview with the Trump voters. And the Trump voters were talking this very, very based sort of class-conscious politics. No disrespect to your friend Mike Figueredo, he would never show that on his show. Majority Report would never show that on the show. They don't want to portray Trump voters
Young
that
Turks
way.
Would
they
never
want
show
to
that.
otherize Trump voters. Young Turks, same thing. That's why they view Russell Brand as right-wing because, as Peter said, I believe it was, they're not just talking about him, they're talking about who he speaks to, right? Putting the ick factor on who he speaks to. And so, you guys were obviously cool to sit in on that segment, so I'm not saying it's you, and I don't want to talk too much trash about your friend, but they would never show that. And that's why they think that Russell Brand is right-wing. That's why they think Debbie Wasserman Schultz owned Matt Taibbi.
You think it's the same thing? How dare he criticize, and we get a lot of crap from Dems because we do that. Like we absolutely criticize the left. And I wouldn't say that they're worse than the right, but I feel like I have more standing since technically I am registered with them in my local. In Florida, we have closed primaries. And if you're not registered as a Democrat in Broward, you're not participating.
Look, we're very direct in terms of our social media content, and we're already seeing the slow chirpings that are coming from various supporters of ours. And the good news is that we happen to have an audience that's very diverse. Even the ones that would be considered that, vote blue no matter who's, even they accept where we're coming from and accept what we've built. If it's because they see us as genuine and know that we don't have an ulterior motive and they really do think that a major change is necessary, they're just very trepidatious about it and they don't want to put themselves in a difficult situation. But we put out a social media post today alluding to the fact that not only did they pass the Willow Project, but they thought it was such a great idea that now they're approving an Italy-sized oil drilling in the Gulf of Mexico, where the biggest drilling disaster on the planet's history took place just over a decade ago. And I reference back to I'm sorry, but we're guys here, the South Park episode where the guy from BP went on and said, we're sorry. Yeah. And that's going to happen again. And of course,
Florida's not come back from that, by the way.
No.
That really was something, as somebody who would travel to the west coast of Florida, like I regularly would go to Sanibel, I can tell you that it never came back from that. Never. The size shells that you would come across, you could tell critters were dying more and younger. Like it never really came back from that mess.
No. And it is another disaster waiting to happen. But of course, what is the message that we're getting? But you don't want Trump and DeSantis to be the next president, do you? So we're just going to have to go with Joe. And all I tell them is,
no,
it doesn't matter what you say to us. It matters that half this country identifies as politically independent, and you are not selling that shit again. You got away with it one time in the middle of a pandemic that people did not have a full understanding
and
of.
barely.
That's it. That's it.
Well, you know what we need to talk about. I would love us to do, because this came up on the show the other day. I would love to do a special feature on it.
Let's do it.
Income inequality is worse in states run by Democrats. Let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it. Let's dig to the bottom of that. Why is that?
Why is that? Because
it's supposed to be marginally better for people, and it's actually not to have Democrats in charge.
No.
With the exception of Florida and Texas, you look at all of the blue states in the country, what is the common theme that they have? They have a major cityscape, and that could be, could be Denver, it could be Chicago, it could be Detroit, it could be New York City, it could be Philadelphia, it could be Boston. I guess New England is really the only region of the country that consistently votes blue that doesn't have a major cityscape, even if you want to consider Boston to be the major cityscape of that whole region, which is fine. Yeah. You could do that. There is something to be said for the cost of living in Miami, which is insane. Even though I think Miami is one of the worst cities in the whole country.
Yeah, I don't understand how people think that they're going to have clean drinking water in 10 years there, but whatever. Keep investing in properties there.
So what did you guys find in that particular article? And if we could pull it up, I'd be happy to do it.
Well, which article are you talking about?
We're talking about income inequality in blue states. I mean, it doesn't surprise me at all. Those are the more elitist places.
Well, there was somebody did a great video essay about it, about 20 minutes. I'd have to dig it up. But it's something that Democrats don't want to reckon with. It's like, okay, I give tours, and I will often say to people on the tours, and, these people, some of them are red states, but a lot of them are blue, and they have certain preconceptions. And I say, so what's the most corrupt state in America? It's New York.
Oh, okay.
New York. New York is the most corrupt state in America.
What is that based on when you say most corrupt? What is
that's based on the number of our politicians that are prosecuted and convicted.
Okay.
Based on that, New York is the most corrupt state in the country. Now, this goes back to Tammany Hall. There are still elements of Tammany Hall with some notable exceptions like Giuliani. It's basically been a one-party state for over 100 years with a few little swings here and there, but it's almost exclusively been run by Democrats since like the mid-19th century. So of course you're going to get this incredible level of corruption when you have it. Wouldn't matter which party it is. Also, because Wall Street is here, because the real estate development is here. I mean, there are just so many opportunities for bribery, kickbacks, graft, and that's a very old tradition in New York. But people who are Democrat inclined, you tell them that, they're surprised, right? Because it doesn't fit the narrative. It doesn't fit the narrative. The Republicans are the corrupt ones, and the Democrats are on the side of the angels. I would argue that the reason for this is, I wrote an article about this that started tongue in cheek, and by the end of it, I realized I was making a cogent argument. I wrote an article a while ago arguing, well, if you really want to play the two-party game, you're better off trying to take over and reform the Republicans than the Democrats, because the Democrats' old base that has an interest in economic reform is in the Republican Party. So who are you pitching this to in the Democratic Party? This is a party of PMCs. They could give a flying fuck about Medicare for all. They could give a flying fuck about free college. Their kids are not going to whatever free public college you come up with if you were to pass something like that, and they get top-notch health care through their employer. They could give a shit about those things. They like to virtue signal that they care about those things. But as we see, whenever the rubber meets the road, how many libs did you hear go, well, but it's the parliamentarian. You can't go against the parliamentarian. Those are the rules. We're not like the Republicans. We follow the rules. How many of that? It's a party of crazy flicks.
Look, I talked to the guy, the thing. And I talked to him and he said, I just can't pay for it, man. But you know what I can do? I got a great idea. You know what we're gonna do? We're gonna drill the shit out of the Gulf of Mexico, just like we're gonna drill the shit out of Alaska. Come on, man. Then they'll never elect.
Do you know who we're supporting in 24?
Oh,
Manchin and the parliamentarian.
No.
The parliamentarian has all the power. Look.
Well, you know, we've got a horse in that race now. You know, we're running our own candidate.
Oh, that's really. Oh, that's.
I just think that if those are the people that have the most power in the party that apparently keep things from happening, then that's who we should put in power. So I'm going with Manchin.
Look at what
I
happened.
don't know her name.
Come on, I wrote the damn bill.
Well, look at you know, they don't want to talk about this. They don't want to talk about the salt tax.
No, they just want to talk about me.
So Trump got rid of that.
The salt tax.
The salt tax deduction. Trump got rid of it.
The only thing about salt is that you got to put it on your steak and potatoes. That's. But it's past my feeding time, and I gotta go.
He's sundowning, folks. He's sundowning. His meds are wearing off.
No, that's just the start because you might get them all tonight with the way we're going.
Yeah.
As soon as the Democrats get back the House and the Senate, what do they want to do? They want to bring back the salt tax deduction.
Do the Democrats really not understand that they really are heading for an iceberg?
They don't care.
Do they really not understand that?
I mean, a lot of people have said this over the years. You know, Jimmy Dore is probably the most prominent proponent of the idea that the Democrats get paid to lose. And it kind of seems that way because whenever they win, it throws a spotlight on the fact that they don't actually want to do any of the things they're telling you they want to do. Roe v. Wade actually threw a spotlight on that. There were, of course, the general corporate media wouldn't show those clips, but some of those clips of Obama saying, yeah, well, it's not a priority for me right now.
That's good.
Some of those made the rounds. Yeah, actually, I can't get one of those masks because I'll get canceled.
Yeah, no, you're not allowed to.
Yeah, no, can't do
I don't. Yeah,
wear that mask.
No, they don't want to. They don't. I've always said I call them Mick resistance. They're not real. I don't know that.
Of course, yeah.
I don't think that it's where they're paid to lose. I just think that the corporations they hedge their bets. They go both ways. They don't really care. And so it just doesn't matter. Right. And that so many of the people that have taken over the party are just so elitist and sanctimonious that it's just turning off more and more people, which is why their party is bleeding like a sieve. But I think that your run-of-the-mill Democrat supporters, not party leaders, but supporters, I don't think they see that they're paid to lose. They actually buy the narrative that if we just had one more vote, if we just didn't have a filibuster, if we just didn't have the parliamentary, they buy all those excuses. But, and I've said from the beginning, if the president of the United States is so friggin' powerful that we're so scared of it being Trump, then why can't he get things done? You can't have it both ways. You can't have me fearful of having somebody like Trump in office, but then you have somebody like Joe, and yet they're not powerful enough to combat Joe Manchin. Then if that's how weak the president is, then why should we even care who's sitting there?
But we have to vote for him again, guys, and you better vote for him. Otherwise, you're a bad person. Remember that.
I think this Wisconsin Supreme Court race is going to be an interesting indicator, right? Because if I had to put money on it, I think the liberal, I forget her name, Janet, it's a long Polish name. I'm not going to try to pronounce correctly. But if I had to bet, I would bet she's probably going to win. And I base that on the 2022 midterm results, right? I mean, in states where abortion rights hung in the balance and it was close, right? Unless it was a deep red state, Democrats tended to win those statewide races. And so as much as it makes sense that they'd be heading for an iceberg in 2024, I think we also have to understand that the Republicans have some big questions they have to answer themselves. And I think the Democrats are hoping that they're not going to be able to answer them. And I think the voter base in this country has just become so normie because all the radicals have been filtered out. They've been bullied out. They've been intimidated out, right? Right. The most radical Trump base, they were the January 6 people and were locking schizophrenics in jail for 5 years for walking around the Capitol building, right? George Floyd, protest BLM. As soon as they made a demand, defund the police, what happened? Democrats, no, we can't do that. We need more funds for the police. So they've been filtered out. And who you have left are the normies. And the normies are not going to go for a fucking 13th century anti-abortion crazy bullshit platform. They're just not. Yeah. As horrible as the Democrats are, they are going to be in the game until Republicans come up with answers to those questions. We covered on our, it was our paid subscriber exclusive video last night that we did about the Republicans in North Carolina bent the knee and passed through a
Bless you.
They passed through the expansion of Medicaid under the ACA, and the Democratic governor signed it. That's an example of the Republicans understanding, I think, that 1 year out of 2024, they have to be less terrifying on reproductive issues and on issues of the ACA. They cannot scare people that they're going to take their, bronze plans away or whatever it is, or they're going to have to expand Medicaid coverage, right? They're going to have to be less terrifying, partly because of what Russell, pardon me, said, which is that they're getting an influx of working class voters now, and they cannot afford to screw them as hard as they are used to screwing them.
Right.
But, I would never accuse Democrats of being fast learners. I wouldn't accuse Republicans of being fast learners either. So it is up in the air, I think. I'm not as certain that the Democrats are headed for a crushing defeat in 2024. It certainly looks bad for Biden, but Republicans, they blew it last time, and they can certainly blow it this time.
Yeah. It's interesting we talk about the Roe v. Wade. I just want to say one of the things that everyone here is freaking out about in Florida is the discussion on the 6-week ban, which is a de facto pure ban. A 6-week ban is a ban. Most people don't even know that's just a ban. And there, of course, people are worried about it, rightfully so. It is worrisome. I don't think there's a snowball's chance in hell that Ron DeSantis, who's running for president, is going to sign a 6-week abortion ban.
I just can't see it. If he does it, he's kissing it goodbye, and he's throwing it right to Trump, because Trump will take full advantage of it, even if he put Coney Island and Kavanaugh on the Supreme Court.
Yeah, no, but the problem is that DeSantis is going to create a situation that, mark my words, he's not going to have to sign it. Because he's not going to be put in a position where he's going to either disappoint the rabid base or potentially lose the majority of the country nationally. He's going to create a scenario where somebody somehow that will never make it to its desk. It is not going to make it to his desk one way or the other. Somebody in that legislature is going to fall on some sword, because he is not going to be in a position to either sign or not sign that bill.
From Politico, with the exception of the governorship, Republicans have long had a lock on most levers of power in the state. They have a strong majority of the congressional delegation. And of course, that's all about gerrymandering. They're on the cusp of supermajorities in both legislative chambers, and conservatives currently hold sway on the state Supreme Court. But a liberal win in the April 4th election could upend all that. It would give liberals an effective majority on the high court, and with it, the possibility to redraw state and congressional district lines in ways that dramatically curb Republican power. Wisconsinites are very familiar with hearing this in the most important election of our lifetime. Of course, Democrats always say that. I don't need to read further on that line. Liberal takeover of the Supreme Court could even factor into the race and control of the U.S. House in 2024. A win by Democrat-backed Janet Protzowitz, I guess is how you say it. Janet.
I lived in Greenpoint for 3 years, and I still got nothing on that name.
Protzowitz?
I guess that probably be it. That whole Chicago-Milwaukee connection right there, which could shift control of the court from a 1-seat advantage for conservatives to a 4-3 liberal majority, could have a domino effect in the state. She's facing former state Supreme Court Justice Dan Kelly, the conservative candidate backed by the state GOP in the technically nonpartisan race. Of course, we all know it is.
It's a loser issue. This is a loser issue to fight on. Most people are not with this.
Yeah, I think it goes without saying that this is definitely an advantage to the Democrats in this particular race.
Is it enough? Is that enough to combat the economy? I mean, I think
the one wrinkle that got thrown in today, which is not a surprise, because again, the sabotage within our system is so great that you almost have to wonder why somebody like George Soros decided that now he's going to get involved and throw $1 million behind Janet and basically just rile up, all of the conservatives and even the less inclined progressives.
Yeah, that's not a good idea.
Now, sick and tired of the things that he's done. I mean, listen, he got involved with our state attorney's race down here.
Yeah.
And he almost pulled it off.
He poked his nose in our state attorney's race.
Let me assure you, he threw $1 million behind this guy. I'll say his name because of shit, because he's not in it anymore. This guy, Joe Kimmock, and then all of a sudden, as soon as he lost the race by a razor-thin margin, when I say he disappeared from public life, disappeared. didn't see him in anything. And I think in a way, because he had presented himself as this progressive who wasn't taking dirty money and all that. You take $1 million from George Soros, that's the end of that conversation. And so he took the money, he almost won, didn't win, and then goodbye. So the fact that it looks on paper that the Wisconsin Supreme Court would go liberal, getting Soros involved in this only adds a significant amount of cannon fodder for the right that they didn't need. Why doesn't somebody step up and say, we don't need George Soros involved in our race?
Well, because the Democrats are run by their consultants and they want George Soros in these races because that's money in their pockets.
Exactly.
It's not. Look, you have with the Democrats and the Republicans, in the Democrats, you have a party with no rationale for its existence. There is absolutely no reason for a Wall Street friendly working class party to exist.
That's like Jews for Jesus.
Right. There's no reason for it to exist.
Yes.
And with the Republicans, you have a party that still is burdened by the ghost of Reaganomics, which they're finding it very difficult to give up. And they're going to have to, because they took the Democrats' old base. You wanted them, you got them. Now you can't just keep giving them platitudes about bootstraps, because that shit's not working for anybody. And the abortion issue is deadly for them. Ever since Reagan threw open the doors of the Republican Party to Jerry Falwell and his ilk. Yeah, you invited them all in.
Graham.
And for that gain, they had to sell out their principles. I mean, such as they were. The Republicans were not this socially extreme party until Reagan made his famous speech, I know you can't endorse me, but I endorse you. And that was it. It opened up the floodgates to evangelicals who, up to that point, people forget this. People like Falwell accepted, they tended to stay out of politics. They saw it as render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. They saw it as worldly, as something they don't get involved in. Once Reagan did that, that's it. Now those people are such a core part of your constituency that you can't really win without them. So what do they do now? You can't run now that it's not just talk.
Right.
Now that really, when you have a pro-life position, it has teeth, because now you don't have Roe v. Wade. You can't run on that nationally anymore.
No.
So that's it. So what do they do? That is a deadly trap for them that they're going to have to figure out a way to get out of.
Do you think that it's simultaneously, when the Republicans got co-opted by the evangelicals, is around the same time that Democrats basically gave their final FU to labor and got all in bed with corporations? And so now
it was around the mid 80s, right? I mean, that was the DLC. That was what, 84, 85, something like that. It was right around
those forces were brewing in the 70s. You started to have these new Democrats starting to bubble up who, I look, if I were teaching a class on how we got here, I would definitely dedicate one of the classes to All in the Family. If you go back and you watch All in the Family,
okay, now these are like fighting words, man. You're criticizing All in the Family?
Oh no, I'm not saying it caused it. I'm saying it described it.
Okay.
Oh no.
All right, because that guy was like my poppy.
Come on, man.
Archie Bunker was like my poppy.
Dude, they never said it, but because Carol O'Connor was from Flushing, Archie Bunker lives in Flushing, because they talk about bus lines that were in my neighborhood.
Yeah.
So big All in the Family fan. But if you watch that early representation of the culture war, it describes to you what happened, because the show is about Archie, who, today you would watch that, you would think he was a Republican. They never said whether he was a Republican or not. He did defend Nixon, which was typical of guys like that at that time, because he really appealed to angry working class kind of voters, which was kind of foreshadowed what would eventually happen with these Reagan Democrats, right? But guys like Archie Bunker back in those days, they almost to a man would have been Democrats. They almost to a man would have been registered Democrats. The arguments that Archie and Mike are having all the time are these culture war arguments, very much centered around language policing, things that would really come into vogue later on.
Was woke.
It was woke. And what was Mike studying to be? A professor. He became a professor, right?
Right.
That is really what happened. Guys like Mike hated the Archie bunkers who made up this post-New Deal portion these working class guys who they considered crude and racist and not culturally sophisticated, hated them, wanted to break these people.
Yeah.
And Michael eventually grew up and took over our institutions, took over our cultural institutions, which is what happens in that show. By the end of All in the Family, he's a professor, right? He's teaching college kids. Clinton was the apotheosis of the Mike and Glorias taking over and putting their vision of liberalism into action. And NAFTA was a big fuck you to all those Archie bunker types that they hated. And they basically said to him, what are you going to do? Vote Republican?
Yeah.
And in the end, they did.
Okay, now my head's blown. I'm sitting here like obsessing on All in the Family because I see what the only difference is while I look at people like Mike isn't definitely like this academic elitist and very overwoke and all of that, I don't think of them as people that would be necessarily in favor of corporate corruption and all of that sort of cronyism necessarily, just that there's sort of this sanctimonious concept of, well, we know better now. We should do better now. Like that kind of.
Well, in the end, they all kind of coalesced around this idea that they represented an expert class that had earned their positions through their merit, through their intellectual superiority. And it's what Thomas Frank calls elite democracy. That's what they really believe in. And guys like Archie Bunker should sit down and shut up. Even though we don't like you, you're better off with our solutions because we know all the good numbers and charts and statistics. And don't worry, what we do for society is going to be better. But they hate those people. You know, Hillary saying the deplorables. That's going all the way back to the 70s. The whole rationale of the New Democrats was to minimize the influence of these people and to what they would later call become a party of the wired workers. That was what you heard throughout the Clinton years. Oh, the new wired workers, that this was going to be the new Democratic Party. And they wanted the traditional Republican base. They wanted the doctors. They wanted the lawyers. They wanted the white collar professionals. And that's who they are now. The two parties' bases have flipped. That's why the Republicans talking Reaganomics just doesn't make any sense anymore for the base that they have. The question is, when are they going to figure that out?
I think it's being figured out right now because you're just seeing this sort of dead ender within the party infrastructure. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't elements of the Democratic Party that can't be salvaged, but in terms of who's pulling it from the very top, it is who it is, and they're not going anywhere. And much like Pelosi's going to try to bequeath her seat to her daughter, and the way I'm sure Steny Hoyer is going to do something similar in Maryland, that, what's his name?
It's an aristocracy. Well, it's our monarchy. We have our own monarchy here, basically. But there are people, they absolutely feel entitled to decide who should get their seat when they're ready to step down.
And the progressives also, as you guys saw in New York, the egos within these political circles are so insane. The fact that Dan Goldman got to Capitol Hill, and I mean, he is in many ways the embodiment of the Democratic establishment today. He's a blue blood. He's the child of one of the richest fortunes, the Levi Strauss jeans fortune, and he should never have gotten there. Yulee New should be in Congress right now, and instead, the lack of organizing properly and recognizing that this isn't about one person. This is about a movement to try to build some type of working class coalition in this country, regardless of what party it's in.
Right.
And the fact that they effed up so badly is just so inexcusable. I don't think Yulee New would have been on a panel criticizing Matt Taibbi for increasing his Twitter following and saying, "Hey, can you please admit that Russian collusion is a real thing?" Fucking hell, man.
Well, when you say they screwed up so badly, who?
Well, we're very friendly with the Long Island activists. You know, that's one group that does a really great job of organizing with non-corporate candidates. And any of those groups that are involved, again, can leave AOC out of the equation. But you do have some good on-the-ground organizing in New York. And then they were split amongst, well, I mean, the fact that Mondaire Jones was even in that race.
Yeah, that
insane.
just became a whole mess.
You know, we became fairly friendly with Alessandra Baegi, who basically gave up her political career to go run against Sean Patrick Maloney. Credit for her for, you know, being willing to do that, even though she's somebody who comes from a privileged background. And she decided that she was going to go for that. Whereas it should have been Mondaire Jones who was doing that. And if he did, Yuh-Line Niou would be in Congress right now. But this is,
and
again,
Yuh-Line was she's a good candidate.
And I'm still convinced that a lot of what the thing is, we're still on the outside. We're not inside. We don't know the type of conversations that these people have. We don't know what type of promises that are made. But I am confident.
I mean, we have it on good authority that once you get into Congress, they sit you down in a room and show you pictures of your loved ones, your relatives, show you that they know what addresses they live at, you know, tell you the phone number. So listen, you're going to vote a certain way on certain things, or, you know, maybe people are going to have an accident.
It'd be unfortunate, you know, if you open up that car door and, you know, just explode it. I mean,
you know, you're driving a Ford. Those things blow up all the time.
Hey, listen, Jen had
no
a
one's
relative
going to ask
that
questions.
knows all about that life.
I did have an uncle that was that. But, you know, I do think he owned
Jen's living that thug life.
He actually owned the largest porn emporium in the Tenderloin district in San Francisco in the 70s.
Who?
And it was my uncle. It was my uncle. And it was back when like he ran the girl.
Who are the brothers? They still the one that's still alive still has that theater over there. They're the ones who made Behind the Green Door. There was this great movie about them with Emilio Estevez.
All right, I don't know, and this is what you're outside of my scope. But like, I think that we have to still in some way participate. And like in Florida, we don't have another option than that party. There is no other option. If we don't have that, we don't get to participate in primaries here. So it's really like, we're really between a rock and a hard place. That's unfortunately the system we have. So what is the alternative?
Yeah. And if you're going to,
what is the alternative? No, I want to know, because I know you guys are very anti-participating in the party, but like where we live, there's no options.
Especially being in South Florida and being in New York City, it's like you know you gotta pick your battles depending on how you want to fight them. And we're just kind of where we are, we're stuck.
Yeah. So like, what would you say? Like, how do you use the electoral process, if at all?
I'm reading Thomas Frank's "The People Know" right now.
That's his new book.
That came out a few years ago.
Yeah. I mean, it came out about.
It's his newest one, but it's
his
a
new.
few years
it's about
old.
a year and a half.
Okay.
Right. Okay.
No, I think it's a little older.
I mean, I read.
It came out during the lockdowns.
Okay.
I remember because I ordered it when I still was like living in like a cave.
Yeah, but that was 3 years ago. It's 2023.
It could be 2 years.
Yeah.
Maybe.
All right, anyway, go ahead. Anyway, sorry. I didn't mean to slow the show down.
And it's getting into drink your whiskey. All right.
I didn't mean to slow the show down.
Freaking lousy rummy.
Yeah.
So it's getting into the history of populism, and his interest is how they flipped the meaning of the word, because really for most of its history, if you said populism, it was like egalitarian, equality, fraternity, right? And they've twisted it to mean demagoguery, right? So he's going back to the beginning of the coining of this word, and it was with the People's Party. It was with the third party, and they called themselves populists. His description, and of course there are obstacles to a third party now that you didn't have then, but his description of that movement, I find it very inspiring, and it is actually giving me a lot of ideas about how you would go about this even today. But some of the points in it that I found really interesting was, for one thing, they were talking a lot, even then, about how you needed a multiracial, multi-ethnic, like everyone in the working class needed to come together. You needed very interesting. They were talking about how the rural and the urban worker, the farmer and the factory worker needed to come together in common cause. Also, they stayed off social issues. The big social issue of that time was temperance and prohibition. And a lot of the people who were attracted to the People's Party, according to Frank, they were moralists, because the whole thing had a kind of almost religious fervor about it. So it attracted a lot of those types. A lot of them were teetotalers. A lot of them were for prohibition, but they didn't talk about those things because they knew it was divisive and they didn't want to split the working class. They're trying to beat these monopolistic railroad companies. They're trying to beat these Eastern bankers. They can't be fighting over prohibition. So they kept that out of the platform. They just didn't get into those things. They focused on their economic agenda and unifying all working class and not ruling anybody out of bounds as long as they were on board with the economic agenda.
That is exactly what we've experienced down here. I mean, I'm
hoping that's what Shama Sawant is doing. That's what I'm hoping is what's happening, is something that will force the parties are who they are, and it's a matter of them being forced in a direction by some other force, and it's not going to come from within them.
Right. Exactly. That's why we've given up on the parties.
Right.
So now the project is, we don't have all the answers. But the one answer I think we will both give, I think I can speak for Keaton on this, is we need to build outside power. Now, we need to put our heads together and figure out how you do that. Maybe it is doing what the People's Party did. They made themselves kingmakers, right? In the end, they won some seats here. They won some seats there. And they made it such you can't win without them. So eventually, it was the Republicans for a while under Theodore Roosevelt was the one who first advanced their agenda. And then eventually it came to its full flowering, of course, in the presidency of FDR. So I'm not even necessarily saying that you start a third party and it's going to knock out one of the other two parties, but it doesn't really matter if it does. If you so force the other parties to adopt your position such that they can't win an election without your support.
Yeah, and that's why, again, I support mutual aid, worker co-ops. All these things are great, but at the end of the day, it's a labor movement. That's what it is.
Well, but
look, there's no oxygen for that in the Democratic Party. I mean, that's why I asked you who blew it in the New York, I think it's the 10th.
Yes.
Where Dan Goldman won. That primary was shut down by the West Village affluent white liberals who either voted for Dan Goldman because they're rich and so is he, or they absorbed the narrative, well, he stood up to Trump and he held them accountable because that's what they read in the New York Times, right? Who gave him the endorsement for that reason. Like,
Disgusting.
There's just no getting through to these people. There's no getting through to these people. These people own the party. 70% of Democrats trust the mainstream media. There is no breaking through in that party. And I think to keep trying over and over again, the reason I am very much opposed to that is because, as Shama Sawant has said, demoralization sets in with repeated losses. In order to keep your movement alive, you have to win. At least sometimes. You don't have to win every time, but you have to win. And so one of the reasons why she has been so successful, not only on the Seattle City Council, but as an organizer, is because she wins. She makes her movement feel like it's worth investing in her because she puts wins on the board. When you keep running a progressive candidate and, Dan Goldman, at a certain point, people check out. And that's actually bad for the movement.
That's a great point.
That is a good point, but I'm going to push back on this. And from this perspective, there are a lot of people who run for office for certain seats that have no effing business doing it. And there could be a litany of different reasons why that is. They're not a great organizer. They are not a great candidate overall. They are not capable of raising money. They have no idea how to connect with business leaders or anybody who understands that society cannot function without healthcare, without a living wage, without a roof over your head, without clean water to drink, endless war, criminal justice reform. These are things that overall most people do give a shit about. But most people are not actually able to connect in a way that we have been able to connect with a lot of people down here. And I say this on the premise of the fact that we did go to the League of Women Voters charity luncheon over the weekend. And
I love my League ladies.
The table that we're sitting at is the type of table that you're talking about. The women that were sitting there were pretty much all over the age of 65. They are obviously very comfortable in their livelihood. But I will tell you that it was basically an even split. There was one that was Italian from New Jersey who comes from those working class roots, and she never forgot them and made it very clear that I cannot stand Debbie Wasserman Schultz. I cannot stand this agenda. They have destroyed our party, and we need a future that focuses on labor. Now, she was the best one of the group. There is another one who happens to be very privileged, but just happens to love Jen and is willing to overlook those levels of comfort living that come with being a liberal on the high hog. Then you also look at somebody else who is understanding that the situation is very bad, even though they hate Trump and it's the knee-jerk reaction to say that it's his fault, but recognizes that maybe we need to clean our own house before we can worry about whether we're getting to Trump or if we should even focus on the presidential election because we have no foundation.
Well, that's what I think. I think that, and I said that a while ago, I think we need to be working on nonpartisan things locally way more than we need to be throwing our eggs in a basket of keep losing and defeatism, which is what I said to him about many times.
And then we had the quintessential Debbie supporter. Over 75, has been in Democratic politics for all of her life, and doesn't call herself a blue dog.
No.
Calls herself a yellow dog.
Had you ever heard that?
I had never heard of such a top.
I had heard of it, yeah. But it's not often used. Most of the time you hear the blue dog.
Do you know
I
what a
do
yellow
recall
dog
hearing
is?
the yellow. I don't know, but I do recall hearing it.
It's ridiculous. Wait till you hear what it is.
So it isn't this idea of, I don't care how much of a strong man a candidate is, as long as they're a Democrat. It's, I don't care how much of a coward the candidate is. If they have a D next to their name, I'm voting for them. So
that's yellow. I get it. Okay.
So that's that.
Means they're voting for the Democrat no matter how bad they suck.
Now, I had a way of communicating with this lady that got her to, first of all, she got very defensive, which is obviously a common knee jerk for the ones who live in that bubble. But I could tell that she was listening and that she wasn't completely adverse. It was this whole idea of, well, you know, Debbie had run for office in 1992, not kidding, and knocked on every door. Now, this is, of course, for a state house race. The district was much smaller, so we're talking maybe a few thousand votes at the time. But what I did say to her is that, with all due respect, the Debbie Wasserman Schultz of 30 years ago is not the Debbie Wasserman Schultz of today. And it is not only crystal clear that there may have been times when she was in the state house that she was a real liberal progressive in a way. But the second she got to Congress in 2004, she has been exactly
she's
what
never
she's
been
been
liberal. But I think
the same thing.
I think that what the point they're making about it is that once you're in there, that party has nothing else to offer. Like there's no there in that party.
It all depends on how you use what is presented to you.
No, I mean, I'm saying what they're talking about.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree with what you guys are saying. But I also think that there has to be a certain attitude about why are you there? The attitude of somebody like Alex, of Corey, of Summer Lee, of all of these people who get in there is, first and foremost, they have been thrust into a position in life that they are about 4 or 5 rungs down the ladder on and have never been able to ascertain what that level is. A salary of $175,000 can't even be equated to everything that comes with that job. You're talking about a job in total value is probably worth over $1 million a year. So when you're in that position, when you have never sniffed $100,000 a year before, and now you're in this line of work, I mean, it is so easy for the average person on the outside to say, well, you know, if I was there, I would do something else. Or, no, I'm succumbing to this because I like it. And I love being in this life. And that is what ends up happening for most of them. There is this
Right. It's not party related.
Yeah, it's not. It's this whole
career
idea.
related.
That's why I think
Right.
one of the best representatives in our Congress, even though he is definitely on the far right, is Thomas Massie. And the reason I use him as a barometer is because there is a guy who doesn't need that life. He is as pedigreed as anybody that's in Congress, and he is principled on what he believes, and he is adamant about not taking corporate money or meeting with lobbyists. Now, you don't have to agree with the fact that he is as pro-NRA as it gets. He is as pro-libertarian as it gets. But there is a guy who literally told Donald Trump to go F himself. Now, of course, Trump was trying to get him out of Congress. It didn't work. So he is the type of person that I would look at and say, on the left, why aren't more people like him? Because that's the type of person, whether they believe it or not, that if they grew a sack and actually told Nancy Pelosi that, they have no idea how powerful that they would become, because this country is yearning for that
but
shit.
why don't they?
We haven't had a left like that in a very long time.
Yeah, and I think they're powerful now in their own way that they are very satisfied with. And look, as much as I would love to believe that the country is yearning for something like that, that's not what I see when I look at these election results. I'm sorry. It's just not. I see the normies doing very, very well. And I think the reason the normies have done well is because a lot of the country has been demoralized and shut out of the system. And that is the
they're not the one
obstacle.
voting.
And as Chris Hedges has said, the people who have been shut out of this system have been shut out of the system to a large extent by the Democratic Party. Therefore, they are very distrustful of anyone who associates with that institution. That's why he insists it has to come
toxic
from the outside. And guess what? I mean, I'm sorry. What evidence do we have to convince them that they're wrong about that? We put AOC in. We put Cori Bush in.
Right.
We put Rashida Tlaib in. Billions out the door for Ukraine. Not a chirp about that. You had AOC hosting some military recruitment event and then gaslighting people for calling her out for it, saying, well, there were other vendors there. Also, it wasn't really that. Right? I mean, like I said, there's just not any real evidence to suggest that the people who checked out of Democratic Party politics did so for a bad reason. And I think what you are up against when you try to infiltrate it again are these institutional incentives, right? And the incentives of the voters themselves. The West Village, New York Times reading liberal has no incentive to put Yulie New in there. There are always going to be class traders who you talk to, PMC progressives. I know several myself. But when you cited the interaction, no, absolutely. But that was my point. When you cited the interaction with the people, you're talking about people who are engaged and locked into this stuff, right? Who are obsessed with participation, which means not only do they get some fulfillment in doing the thing, but they also get a lot of fulfillment in really thinking about the thing and really analyzing what they're doing and the moral implications of what they're doing. Most people don't engage in politics that way. It is a way to obtain what is in their interest to obtain. Most people don't have political opinions. They have interests, and they vote to pursue those interests. And to me, when I look at the makeup of the Democratic Party now,
it's branding.
That is just
it's like wearing the
Lululemon
Lululemon yoga pants.
Right, exactly.
And what I would say is different about where you guys are versus where we are is that the party really has hit rock bottom in this state. And I think it's way too early to tell, and no decision is being made in terms of what we're going to do in the future. But I am starting to get the impression that the type of people that need to be done with Wasserman Schultz are starting to be done with her.
But the only way to make that, I mean, look, that in theory could work.
What
right?
difference will it even make, though?
On the Debbie Wasserman Schultz level, but I'm saying if you blow
and
that
that's
up,
what we could talk about, because we're in a very different situation. This is not a typical scenario. Like in every other case, I know exactly what you're saying, and I agree, and I've said it to him. But down here, there's just a different opportunity to do something at a local level and at the state level that would be basically cutting off a head of a snake that stands in the way of local and state things that could be better for a lot of people.
Like the level of desperation in the state at this point when it comes to DeSantis is able to run roughshod, and he's going to do it at the national level. People are, if you haven't seen, or if any of you out there who are going to hear this interview, if you've not heard the interview that he just gave with Piers Morgan, go and listen to it, because it's really going to give you an idea of where this guy's going. It doesn't matter what the national.
He just did it. I haven't seen that.
Oh yeah, it just came out, I think, yesterday. It doesn't matter what the national polls say. It matters what Iowa and New Hampshire say. Yep. That's what's going to allow him to build that momentum. And most of the polls show DeSantis ahead of Trump in those two states, and that matters.
I've been singing this song for I don't know how long, Keaton. A year.
About a year now, exactly.
Momentum is a very dangerous animal in politics. People really don't understand how it can just catch on like wildfire. Yep. And the same is true down here. Wasserman Schultz has had her hand in so many things that have brought this party down that a lot of people are starting to look at it now. The fact that cost of living is so out of sight, out of mind down here in terms, I'm in commercial real estate, so I see this all the time. The ability to live is so bad. And the only real economic populism on the left that really exists in the state is in the I-4 corridor between Orlando and Tampa. You have a couple of good people that are up there. Yes, there are a lot of issues already with Maxwell Frost. It is what it is, but he has a lot of that energy behind him. Anna Eskamani is by far and away the best state house representative we have in this state, and she is generating a lot of that interest. Now, even though she plays in that overwoke sandbox, she never misses an opportunity to say, this is an economic class war. Right. That's what this is. Now, you're going to use these little tools like what's going on with the books and with the teachers and the gender and all that stuff. You are using that as an excuse to not talk about the fact that income inequality in the state's insane. The ability to rent a home or an apartment is insane.
But the question is to what?
But didn't the Democrats set that trap for themselves?
Yeah.
You handed that to them.
That's true. But the person most directly responsible for that is our Congresswoman. And it's not even a question.
It's really
that's a national problem. It's a national problem that Ron DeSantis said, you know what? This is great. This is great.
They're making it too easy for him. They're giving him an opportunity. Listen, if DeSantis is the nominee, I understand, Keaton, you had brought up before about the issue with abortion and what may happen there. I'm sorry, but DeSantis versus Biden.
No, I think DeSantis will win. I'm not saying he's not the favorite in that race. Yeah. I would not.
The Democrats have nobody, and that's the bottom line. There is not a single person.
He's not going to be able to hide in the basement this time.
No, and he barely won in a pandemic. And the bottom line is they don't have a single person that could beat Trump or DeSantis.
Do you see?
So I don't see what difference.
Do you guys see any scenario where Biden steps down?
No.
Possibly. If you remember those pre-COVID campaign appearances, you can only imagine what his campaign appearances are going to be like.
My concern is
if it gets bad enough.
But who would they even put there?
Alzheimer's.
Well, that's the question, Jen. Look who's polling second. Kamala Harris. How many? Listen, man, I don't know. What do I got to tell you?
Well, they're already preparing for that. Like you can tell when they put out the memo, the propaganda.
I'm telling you right now, if Kamala Harris is the nominee against either Trump or DeSantis, it's going to be a 33 to
Well, it's going to be like a Reagan-Mondale thing.
More than that.
I don't know if it's going to be that. I'm not going to go there. But is it going to be like a 33 to 35 state landslide? Yeah, it is.
Wouldn't a debate but imagine the debate between someone like Kamala and either Trump or DeSantis, and what
that would be awesome. That would be the greatest debate.
Trump versus Kamala would be the funniest election ever, obviously.
I can say this because I've met the guy. I've stood in his presence for about 10, 15 minutes. Talking to a good friend of mine who's well connected in politics. I won't say where, I won't say the circumstance, but I will tell you guys that the one person the Democrats do have that could potentially generate interest is Governor Pritzker in Illinois. He's the one guy. And the reason I say that is because he gives a good speech, he's got good humility, and he's a rich fuck. And when you've got that working in your favor, the Democratic Party will bend over backwards for anybody with money. That's the way it is.
They still can't.
Doesn't mean it'll pull in voters.
No, Biden's not going to step down because Kamala is the number 2, and they know Kamala can't win. And so if Biden steps down, they're forced in a spot where they're going to have to reject they're African American, or not African American, sorry, but they're
guys think
woman of color
just
vice
saying,
president.
if he has enough campaign appearances where he goes all corn pop, they might have to do it. Might get to the point that you just can't.
You got to give him the hook.
Credibly run him.
Well, he's been. I mean, listen,
I would have thought that the first time when he was talking about the kids in his hairy legs.
This is, I mean,
or hair sniffing. How about hair sniffing?
This is a great opportunity to bring up, obviously, the main topic. Of course, we'll briefly cover Bernie, and obviously, this is.
Well, no, but is it okay if I just make one point? Because you mentioned rock bottom, right? Democrats in this state have hit rock bottom, and that's where you see an opening. That's why you see an opening to reform the party, because the party's fallen on such hard times that they're desperate. They know they have to change direction, or else they will have no power, right?
Yeah.
I buy that premise to an extent. The only way that works, though, is if you are willing to embrace a full-on Bernie or bust type strategy. Not going in meeting by meeting, function by function, and being nice to these people. The only way to do that is to slap the martini glasses out of their hand and say, listen, if you don't vote for the progressive we want, we are sitting out and we are instructing everyone in this party to sit out. And yes, we are handing the country over to Ron DeSantis or Donald Trump. You don't like it? Vote for our candidate. Otherwise, that's what you're getting. And I'm sorry, man. The Democratic constituency does not have it in them to say that.
No, but what if you have somebody in there that doesn't care about keeping their job and uses that?
But what do you mean by somebody in there?
Anybody. What if you had a congressperson in there who wasn't concerned about keeping their job and wasn't concerned about being reelected?
What if you had a congressperson?
I'll answer that right now.
Yeah.
Matt Tybee had the IRS come to his door. That's my
But
answer.
even if
what they will do to such a person. That's why nobody does it, man. I'm like joking around that they show you pictures, but listen, man, they say something to these people.
Well,
they
threaten them with whether it's committee positions or that they're going to have them primaried or that they're going to.
I think it goes beyond that. I think it goes to, well, what do you think you're going to do after we make sure that you get your reputation completely dragged through the mud by the media to the point that you lose your position here, and you've burned us so hard that you can't get a job in our media ecosystem, and you're not going to get one of those cushy board jobs, and you're not going to get hired at any university that we have any pull at. Then what are you going to do? You're going to shake the cup on the street?
I think that somebody who has zero fucks to give that is in that position and isn't scared.
That's what AOC said, right?
But hold on.
You got to be ready to lose, right?
I'm curious to hear the end of this.
And I've said this for a very long time about her, for me, and I've not met her personally. Is I think there's a lack of age, wisdom, maturity, and experience, and I see that also that concerns me with Maxwell and some of these people that are getting in there. I think it's very easy to be kind of co-opted and be lured into some fancy high-end power career when that's where you're at. But not everybody would necessarily be like that.
Yeah, but I'm not talking about twisting their arms. I'm talking about twisting the voters' arms.
Oh, yeah.
I'm talking about,
how to get somebody like that in a position.
You have to.
No. I'm talking about. Listen. Well, what I'm saying is, if you think you're going to take over the Democratic Party, you're going to have to do it more than one congressperson at a time.
No. It's not about taking over the party. I have no delusions. The Democratic Party is going to go like my only affiliation is that technically I'm registered. Oh no. That's delusional.
Okay, so what's the goal then?
The goal in my perspective is you need somebody that is going to take somebody and work with somebody on the outside like your Shama Sawant and be that voice and use their platform and bring labor back into the fold.
But they're outnumbered. They're outnumbered.
It doesn't matter.
Just takes one.
You're not talking about actually getting any policy. That's delusional.
Right.
That's not going to happen until you have enough of a big thing on the outside.
No, you have to create enough of a momentum on the outside that basically having that person, you want to call him a political martyr, whatever you want to call him, is going to make Congress look so bad that they're going to have no choice unless.
But bad to who? Bad to who? They're going to Jill Stein that person.
No.
Well, you're talking about you need like a Cary Grant type, right?
Well, let's put it. Well, I'm not.
Yeah, no, Mr. Potter and the whole great scheme.
I'm thinking of Jimmy Stewart and Mr. Smith Goes.
That's what I mean. That's what I mean. Jimmy Stewart. That's right. He's right. I got the wrong guy. That's what I mean. Jimmy Stewart.
I knew where you were going.
I was talking about her. So what I'm going to say is, you need somebody in Congress that's the equivalent of what someone like Shama Sawant was on the city council for Seattle. You need someone in there that is okay being hated by the people and having people in there not like them to draw attention. And AOC started out that way.
Yeah.
She went in there.
That's
she
what we thought she was
out
going to be.
doing that.
Yep.
And it was effective. And the question is, how do you get somebody in there who isn't going to be co-opted by money and power?
But how necessary is that person, this one person who we're thinking of, recruiting and smuggling through customs and getting in there? How necessary are they if we do what they did in France? Like, I think these people can be bullied around if people make enough noise anyway.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to go on some like treasure hunt to try and find some like Aladdin who's going to rub that lamp and make something happen. I don't care. Let's just get everybody into the streets and mobilize and build and force these fuckers to, give a little bit up, because that's what's at stake here. Like, when I hear people talk about these big ticket items like Medicare for all or even free college and things like that, it's like, I'm sorry, at this point, man, the opportunity to fast track those big ticket items came and went with the Bernie campaigns.
Yes.
That was it. That was your chance.
But now
so don't tell me about Medicare for all. I'm sorry?
No, but now what you have is I totally agree. It isn't going to be about the legislative policy making portion of what they do. What they also are supposed to be doing, which is something that they don't do, is they're supposed to be working for their constituents locally and helping do things locally, bringing a voice to constituent issues. They don't do that because they're not actually public servants. They're corporate whores. Right. So the difference is that if you have somebody that is using that platform in that capacity, then I'm just saying, every person is different. And I just think, I agree with you. There's nothing going to happen that's going to change the party.
Yes.
The Democratic Party, that ship sailed. I have no delusion about that.
And there are people who, you guys have communicated with that, just go, listen, there's going to be, we don't do enough crossovers in left spaces and just getting more people on board with this idea of a working class labor agenda. There are people who just believe in just burning down the whole damn thing. Okay, that's fine. The way I see it, you have to know where the people are and what they're willing to do. And so reading the situation and recognizing that there is a way to get their attention without telling them it's Bernie or bust in certain instances, or telling them that it is Bernie or bust in other situations. Knowing where you are, knowing your reach, and I think those things are all very important. But the problem we are facing is that, yes, we have people that we have given our blood, sweat, and tears to get them into that position of power, and they're not willing to put their very comfortable, privileged life in jeopardy in any way. And it's much worse on the Democratic side, because on the Republican side, you get a lot of guys that are small business owners, that are entrepreneurs, that are successful. They don't need this life.
Right, but why does AOC not feel that pressure? She doesn't feel that pressure because she knows that all she has to do is virtue signal about LGBT rights every few days, and the brain dead base of the party is going to say, well, that's good enough for me, and it is good enough for them.
But there's a lot of people that have been in her circle for a while that are starting to get tired of it, because they recognize that you need fighters out there. And she is supposed to be one of the biggest ones, if not the biggest one, because she created a platform that allows her to do it if she so chooses.
But that's her fight. Her fight is against the fascist GOP, right? We're trying to erase people, and I'm an ally. Like that's all it is. It's just this performative.
She wants to be Nancy Pelosi. I think she's just decided that this is her career now, and that this is where she wants to be.
When they get in there, here's what I think. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to slow the show down by opening this can of worms again, but I did want to get a little more of an idea where you guys
with clips on our respective shows.
Well, that's okay. I wanted to get a better idea of where you guys were coming from, because I was a little bit unclear on it. But when they get in there, what they realize, these progressives, is they cleared this major hurdle by primarying out, a corporate Democrat, a centrist Democrat. And then they realize when they get in there, The bar is so much lower than that because now all they have to do is attack Republicans. So they find the cartoonish Republicans that they can dunk on, and they dunk on them, and that in their mind constitutes a fight. There was just a video you talked about, Thomas Massey. I believe that's who Jamal Bowman just got into a screaming match with. I saw that pop up on my feed.
Congressional Hall, was that where that was, or something?
Yeah, it was about gun control, right?
Yeah.
So that's a moment where he gets to show his constituents what a fighter he is by getting in this guy's face and screaming about how he takes NRA money, right? That's what passes for a fighter in the Democratic Party, even to the progressive base. They love that shit. There's no pressure on them to take things to the next level and start turning the screws on the system for gains like universal health care. Right?
I want that.
There's just no example. There's just no incentive for that because now that they won, they're not running against the corporate Democrat anymore. They're in. They're there. They're getting the money coming in. Right now, they got all these Republicans they can dunk on, and they look great doing it, so they'll continue to.
But therein lies the rub when it comes to the gun issue. The big issue that no one wants to talk about, the biggest one of all, is that society is breaking down. People don't fucking care anymore.
No.
They are willing to kill people because the world is a shit place to live in for so many of them that they just don't care. And they don't want to have that conversation because it's the economic anxiety that over 100 million people in this country face every day. And they don't want to talk about the fact. You're lucky that there isn't a mass shooting every hour of every day.
I'm not sure that there's not.
So you're getting to the point where you really have to understand that there is a level of desperation. Listen, did the trans shooter shoot up a Christian school?
Why do we have to mention who that is?
I'm only mentioning it because in context of why did it happen? Well, whatever their reasoning is, they get to a breaking point where they're like, no, let's just kill people.
I have a question for you. Is it a biological male? Because if it's a biological male, then that is case in point, all of these shootings. Sorry, all men.
All right, Jen. You're having a very different treatment of that shooting than you have when, say, your conservative straight white male does it, where they want to blame Tucker Carlson when that happens, right? Yeah. So why aren't you blaming the very extreme rhetoric coming from certain trans activists about people who have differences of opinion, even liberal people who have differences of opinion about youth transition, this kind of thing, as committing a genocide, literally committing a genocide? Now, if you're going to blame Tucker Carlson when a Christian, white, conservative, whatever does this, well, then you should be blaming those trans activists for this, right? Now, to be clear, I don't think you should be blaming either. I think it's a very dangerous precedent to connect speech to what random acts of violence people commit.
Oh, I don't
because
ever
of that
do
speech.
I don't ever do that.
But they do it anytime. Can you imagine if this shooting had been some straight white male, right? It would go right to Tucker. Oh, look at this. Look at what Tucker said on his show. So why aren't we talking about trans activists who are threatening to rape and kill J.K. Rowling? Are they responsible for this shooting? Do you know that there were multiple swattings of Christian schools the next day, today? Are they talking about that? And are they blaming those activists and their rhetoric for that?
They want a country divided and wanting to kill each other because it's
to
maintain the system that is screwing us all, because it's easier to do it that way rather than say maybe the system's broken and that because we have 300 million guns in this country or whatever the number is. It's like when you see Shannon Watts go on CNN, it's like this is only going to piss people off more. This is not going to reduce the tension. This is only going to
They just don't know what to do with it, and they love to fundraise off of it like they do with Roe v. Wade. Gun control is like one of the Democrats' best fundraising
But if you
tools.
look at the biggest voices, the people who are always on national television regarding this particular issue, it is always the most privileged people in society that have in these positions.
Oh, yeah. So the one kind of privilege they never mention is class privilege.
Well, of course.
They talk about every other kind of privilege, never class privilege.
Shannon Watts is one person in particular who I have a level of disdain for when it comes to these political talking heads that I cannot even wrap my head around. She is as big of a Hillary supporter as anybody there is in the political sphere. She is always at these super high level fundraisers for the Democratic Party. It goes without saying that is the embodiment of the party elite that the average person in this country cannot stand, will never stand, and wants nothing to do with them. The Democratic Party, if they were the voice of the unions and labor, if that was the voice of the party, then we would be having a completely different conversation. The voice of the party today are the people who live in New York City and San Francisco. That is the voice of the party. That is the direction.
Which is the Republican critique.
It very much so. Now, so how do we change that? I'm not entirely sure.
It isn't by banning assault weapons.
Well, no, that's not going to solve the problem. There's too many weapons out there.
Besides, with society breaking down, don't you want to be able to get a gun?
Okay, first of all, I personally
that's actually no. I mean, look, you make that as a joke, but that actually is the heart of the issue right there.
Yes,
is like, yes, guns are part of the problem. Of course, they are a big part of the problem. But the reason you have so many guns is because you have a violent culture. So you have a violent culture in which people feel a need to arm themselves, and then the fact that they arm themselves makes the culture even more violent. Right?
Well, it's that, and
it's a cycle. It's a cycle. So, like, the guns are not the cause or the effect. The guns are the symptom. The guns are the symptom. They are people turn to guns because we have a violent culture that is now collapsing all around us.
Yeah, right? I would also argue that you can't have a country where the only thing we make is weapons and arms. The military-industrial complex, like, you can't be the complete vision of violence globally and not expect violence at home.
To me,
it's
that's Chris Hedges. You know, if you read his last book, I believe it was his last book, America: The Farewell Tour, he really got into that. How I don't think people who live in states like New York, like us, I don't know how aware we are of that arms manufacturing is like one of the only reliable manufacturing jobs left in the United States.
That's all we do.
Right. And if we really reformed our military, it would throw all these people out of work. Like it's a jobs program building all these weapons.
Well, and all of everything that we sell overseas is that. That's it. That's what we have. So for people to think that you're going to ban something that is the only thing that we make anymore, you're nuts. You're nuts.
Well, we also export. We don't just export the guns. We export the violence. We export the abusive policing of other peoples around the world. And this is where the rubber really hits the road, especially this week, where you have these French protests that are very successful and very rowdy, right? In some cases, even quite violent. People here in the States think, well, if we give up our guns, we're not going to have a check on the governments. Well, look at France. The French people are not packing, right?
Yeah.
Some of the cops in France are armed, not all of them, but the national ones are, and they have been deployed, and you see violent clashes between the cops and the ordinary people of France. The ordinary people of France have very, very few guns, but they are still able to disrupt, and they are still able to affect the system. The difference is France is not the dominant imperial power on this earth anymore. They don't abuse people around the world. They don't enforce their will around the world through force and threats, whereas we do. And our policing reflects that. We have a militarized police here at home to the point where an unarmed population here, we would get crushed by the cops.
Right.
Because the cops here mirror our international police state.
Right.
Literally.
Right? And that's the difference.
That's where the excess arms go that can't be, like, that's why our police departments are so over militarized, because that's all we produce in this country. And there's only so many wars, I guess. And so if you got to sell surplus, you got to sell this surplus local. That's why we have police departments with tanks. Like crazy. The fact that there's a place named Cop City to me is absurd. Like this is like, and people are confused why we have shootings.
Well, that's they took that from the Guns N' Roses song, right?
Right. Is that what it's from?
The Cop City is what inspires people to arm up, because they feel like if the cops are building mock cities to run basically domestic war games experiments on the people, then we need guns. We need guns in case they come for us. And then what happens? This kid grabs a hold of the gun, they go and they shoot up a school, and everybody thinks, oh my God, what a horrible, dangerous place. I need a gun.
Right.
Right. And then it happens over and over again.
Which is why the people who are asking you to give up guns are people that live in, let's say,
gated communities,
or live like somebody like Shannon Watts probably lives on Park Avenue. So it's very easy to have that disposition of, well, if we just gave up the AR-15s, that's going to solve the problem. No, unless you're willing to change the actual infrastructure of the way the United States of America does business, this is a useless argument and is never going to go anywhere.
No.
Ever.
Right.
I mean, look, I wouldn't entirely agree that it's entirely useless. Like, I think the guns are a symptom, and symptom management is effective in treating symptoms, right? You're not going to cure the illness, but you are going to have fewer mass shootings if you have fewer guns in circulation. That's quite obvious. The
what will also have less shootings?
Without the more systemic reform, there is nothing to stop that cycle from starting back up again, right? Because as long as you have that paranoia and that violence that is so systemic in our country in ways that it is not in other countries around the world, then that cycle is only going to kick back up. There's no way to actually put a halt to it permanently.
Right. I think a lot of it also goes back to lack of social safety net. Like, this is a very desperate place, and it's a very dog eat dog place. There is no concept of collective. There is nobody cares about what's going on with their neighbors. When you look at other countries, it's not like that. There is a much broader concept, care of collective. Even in countries, there's countries you could go ask the most conservative person there, but they're going to still think everybody should have health care. You know, like we just don't have that concept of collective and that same give a shit in this country about other people. So it's only when it happens in the rich white suburbs that then people get really interested in fighting for the gun issue. It doesn't bother them that in poor and vulnerable neighborhoods, they have more handgun deaths every day, you know, in a week than you would see in one mass shooting, right? Like, this is the common thing. And it is a position of privilege to think that, oh, if we just ban assault weapons, that'll solve all our problems. When in fact it won't solve our problems, and it'll just create a black market and all these other things. And it's just completely impractical, but it makes liberals feel like they're accomplishing something to say, if we can just do this, you know, that'll solve the problem.
Well, that's a perfect metaphor for that would be the ACA, right? They passed this signature healthcare bill. You still have tens of thousands of people a year dying because they can't afford medicine, but it gave the Democratic Party something to point to and say, we've done this.
Yes.
We've done this. And now it is very clear they have no intention whatsoever of doing anything beyond that. Right.
Right.
That's why the Inflation Reduction Act was such a horrible thing, because they felt like, okay, that was our infrastructure bill. Now we never have to do any of the other stuff that was on the Build Back Better. We passed that already.
They're going to be dining off that for years.
Right, exactly.
Another person say that Joe Biden is the most progressive president of our lifetime.
No, he's like the most progressive president since FDR. He's like the next FDR.
Like, do you feel like
they'll repeat whatever they're told. I remember during Schmovid, I was seeing all these libs talking about, oh my God, the way the drug companies were able to do this so fast. It's really a miracle of science. And, and I would challenge them like, well, do you know these drug companies are refusing to release the IP, even though actually the underlying technology for these vaccines was developed with government funding, but they're not releasing the IPs. I actually had one of these shit lips tell me, I love when they talk like they're insiders because they absorb that language from the media. Well,
that's the whole design.
These countries don't have the distribution network. They're not going to go build roads in these countries. That's not how the game is played. Oh, really? That's not how the game is played.
That's the sad truth about being as well informed about all of this stuff that we are, because once you are and it's like you can't go back to sleep.
You can't unsee it.
And then once you know what a drone sounds like when they talk on both sides.
Well, I can tell you what they watch. Like, I'm like, oh, you must watch this.
Just by what they believe.
Yeah. No, of course. Points. It's just talking. Yeah. They don't understand.
The overly smug, without question, are MSNBC viewers. The ones who are totally mainstream in their opinions are CNN, and the ones who think the world is coming to an end is Fox News. Like, it's basically, it's so easy to figure it out. And that's,
because they don't understand the issues.
No.
Because the truth is, the people on those shows don't understand the issues. So they're not really explaining it. They're just stenographers reading whatever talking points they're given to read. And then those talking points sort of become a policy idea. Well, it's not really anything. It's just that's just your talking point, and it stands for nothing. And so you have people just repeating vapid platitudes over and over again, all over the place.
Well, let's just make sure that the people that come here tonight understand that there was a very important thing that happened on the Hill today. And even though I haven't done enough for the American people, I certainly did enough today for Howard Schultz, because let's face it, we need to stop the union busting that goes on in this country. So here comes.
I do think that if Bernie had been the president,
we're gonna have you come on and do a bid endorsing our candidate.
He does.
Our candidate was in the chat earlier. Extra Bulla. We're running him.
He popped in.
He does Bernie, he does Trump, and he does.
Oh yeah, no, he does Bernie and Trump. I saw Bernie and Trump.
We're going full Pat Paulson. We're running a candidate.
His name is. Just let him know that I appreciate his efforts. I have to talk to my good friend Joe, and he is my.
Joe is not anybody's friend.
He is my friend, and he told me that I have to talk to him first about any endorsements. I don't want to make any mistakes. So, without further ado, I want to just recap exactly what I did on the Hill today.
We know what you did.
No, I did. I definitely showed that Mr. Schultz.
You did.
Not Wasserman Schultz, just Schultz. Just Schultz, the regular Schultz. We're going to show him exactly what we did.
Are we watching this? Okay.
I was about to say, are we watching it, or are we going to reenact it? Do you want me to play Howard Schultz?
Is that because we're Jewish? You want us to play these two Jews?
Union busting campaign in the modern history of our country. That union busting campaign has been led by Howard Schultz, the multi-billionaire founder and director of Starbucks, who is with us this morning only under the threat of subpoena. Let us be clear about the nature of Starbucks' vicious anti-union efforts. The National Labor Relations Board, NLRB, has filed over 80 complaints against Starbucks for violating federal labor law. There have been over 500 unfair labor practice charges lodged against the company, and judges have found that Starbucks broke the law 130 times across 6 states since workers began organizing in the fall of 2021. Are you aware that NLRB judges have ruled that Starbucks violated federal labor law over 100 times during the past 18 months, far more than any other corporation in America?
Sir, Starbucks Coffee Company unequivocally, and let me set the tone for this very early on, has not broken the law.
Okay. Are you aware that on March 1st, 2023, an administrative law judge found Starbucks guilty of, quote, egregious and widespread misconduct, end quote, widespread coercive behavior, and showed, quote, a general disregard for the employees' fundamental rights, end quote, in a union organizing campaign that started in Buffalo, New York in 2021. Are you aware of that?
I'm aware that those are allegations.
What's the balls on this fucking scumbag? I don't mean to talk over the video, but to have the Starbucks cup privilege toward the screen with the logo on the TV.
That's what they call product placement.
Yeah.
Let me remind you that federal law at 18 U.S. Code Section 1001 prohibits knowingly and willfully making any fraudulent statement.
I understand that.
Were you ever informed of or involved in a decision to fire a worker who was part of a union organizing drive?
I was not.
Were you ever informed of or involved in a decision to discipline a worker in any way who was part of a union organizing drive?
I was not.
Have you ever threatened, coerced, or intimidated a worker for supporting a union?
I've had conversations that could have been interpreted in a different way than I intended. That's up to the person who received the information that I spoke to him about.
Were you informed of or involved in the decision to withhold benefits from Starbucks workers in unionized stores, including higher pay and faster sick time accrual?
My understanding, when we created the benefits in May, 1 month after I returned as CEO, my understanding was under the law, we did not have the unilateral right to provide those benefits to employees who were interested in joining a union.
Well, look, he unfortunately was lying through his teeth, and I tried to call him out as many times as I could.
He did a pretty good job. What really
a pretty good job.
Was infuriating, and I did appreciate Bernie calling this out, when he's told that a judge found you responsible for this, found you liable for this, and he's like, well, we didn't do that. Well, no, that's like somebody after a guilty verdict saying that they didn't do it. But no, actually you did, because that's what we said. That's what that means. That means you did it.
Bernie also asked him in that hearing, did you ever threaten or coerce, union employees? And he didn't even say no. He just said, I had conversations that may have been perceived a certain way, but
that's the smart legalistic answer, because you can't prove intent. If you got to build a case on trying to prove intent, you're almost always going to lose. Prosecutors generally won't even bring a case like that. So, he knows the law. He was very careful in those answers. It could have been construed that way.
Yeah.
Well, I am serving notice to each and every CEO of a major corporation in America and beyond that think they're going to get away with union busting. That is not going to happen. The buck stops with me, and I will be fighting on behalf of labor as long as I am alive, and maybe even after I die.
I think Bernie, did what, what is right in his wheelhouse. I mean, that's
Bernie at his best.
Yeah, that's Bernie doing what he does. More notably, though, I mean, the reason I think this is really worth talking about is just what an utter demon Howard Schultz just revealed himself to be in those hearings, right? Like it's more an indictment of him.
Did you see when he started taking exception to being called a billionaire?
Billionaire. Well, that's what I posted.
He earned his billions.
Chat. If you guys want to play that, it's right there. It's in the private chat.
He took exception to that he qualifies as a billionaire? Or
no, that's being used as a pejorative.
As a pejorative. He started whining. Yeah.
Because it is a pejorative. Because
this is hilarious. This is great. But this, actually, I love how Bernie handled this. He handled this in true Bernie fashion by saying, all right, that's enough. You're out of time. No, he didn't say you're out of time. He didn't even listen to the substance of what he was saying. And then Howard Schultz says, well, that's not fair. He says, no, it is fair. You've had a lot of time. He wasn't even listening to him bitching about, I earned all my money.
Oh,
he wasn't having it. Yeah, play this. This is great.
That, okay? I grew up in federally subsidized housing. Let me finish. I grew up in federally subsidized housing. My parents never owned a home. I came from nothing. I thought my entire life was based on the achievement of the American dream. Yes, I have billions of dollars. I earned it. No one gave it to me. And I've shared it constantly with the people of Starbucks.
It's great.
And so anyone who keeps labeling this billionaire thing,
Mr. Schultz, I don't mean to cut you off. We have time limits here, and you have the opportunity. I'm not cutting you off.
It's your moniker constantly. It's unfair.
No, it is not. You have had more time. I've been generous with the time. I'm sorry.
But Mr. Chairman,
we have a room full of people.
He's saying it's unfair that you're criticizing me for being a billionaire.
Okay.
And Bernie's saying, no, it's not unfair. You've had time to speak.
Okay?
Like he wasn't even addressing the substance of what he was saying.
Let me finish. I grew up in federal.
Great.
Oh my God.
These guys
so great.
They really they're so oppressed. They've gone through so much. I work so hard to make sure my workers could only make $4.75 an hour so I can have a yacht the size of a small city in the south of France. Don't you understand?
What a scumbag. What an unbelievable scumbag.
Well, I actually had this debate with a friend of mine who's more on the lip side, who keeps making the argument. Remember, this is kind of the point of view of PMCs. Like, well, Starbucks is the wrong company to do that with because they actually treat their workers really well. Now, I don't know if you saw, there was I forget her name. There was a congresswoman or a senator from Minnesota who questioned him, and she said because he was making that point. We give very generous benefits. We already do all that. And she said, do you understand that people have a right to unionize in America? It's not a question of whether the company is good or not.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. I mean, if you're so damn good,
like
why would
I've never heard of her. She was quite good.
Was it Stabenow? For some reason, I think
no. It wasn't anyone I've ever seen before.
That's who well, Stabenow is, I think, the other senator from
I'll
Minnesota.
go back into my, maybe I'm wrong.
Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, you know what?
I'll go back into my library. I'll find.
I could be wrong about Stabenow.
One of the things that was interesting is the fact that they did like this concept of, well, we provide good things, so they shouldn't need to unionize. Like as if you get to decide, okay, so we pay them this, so they shouldn't have to unionize. And it's so like, it's just so condescending and just so absurd to think that, okay, because you're the management, you get to decide what is and is not worthy. But what I do find also sad is that this is still happening in the same year when we have a president that just fucked the railroad workers over a sick day. Basically is what these people were really wanting, is a sick day, an extra sick day, something like absurd like that. And this is now we're looking at it from the perspective of, oh, look at them standing up to Howard Schultz and how he's union busting, and oh, we're really sticking up for labor. But yet a couple of months ago, where was the fight for labor? You know what I mean? Like this is where I'm seeing like such a conflict, because I don't like, this is also very performative. Because nothing's fundamentally going to happen. Like, what's going to happen to this guy? What's the word?
The senator, by the way, is Tina Smith. I put the YouTube link in the private chat.
Oh, okay. Interesting. What should happen is people should boycott Starbucks. Like, there really should be boycotts of Starbucks, of any non-unionized house. Because, look, the thing about Amazon is, that's sort of unavoidable. Like, I shop on Amazon.
That chip sale, man.
I have
to.
I'm not a rich guy. I don't have infinite
just
consumer choices. I have to do that.
Yeah,
there are a million places you can get a decent cup of coffee. You don't have to go to Starbucks, right?
We just did a bit of my great grandfather Menachem Dabular inventing hip hop on his Victrola pushcart. It's a long story, but in the process of getting the costume, I chose not to use Amazon.
Took you like 4 days to find
it. It was a nightmare. It was a nightmare. This store's closed and this one doesn't have it. And
because Amazon buys out everybody just like Walmart did.
They've made it impossible to do it that way.
So when people say that, well, why don't you just not shop there? I'm thinking,
well, whenever I can buy direct from, like whenever there's a choice and I can get it not from Amazon, I don't. Like if I,
but that's the thing.
Waiting an extra day, okay, whatever.
I tried.
Yeah,
I tried.
No, you can't sometimes.
With Amazon, there's often not a choice. With Starbucks, there's always a choice. Yeah. There's always another place to get a cup of coffee, right? You don't need to buy that fucking burnt dog shit water coffee from this fucking scumbag who goes up there and cries about how, like, to actually try and make that a moral issue, right? To actually try to, like, appeal to people's sense of justice by saying, I shouldn't be demonized because I earned the billions of dollars. First of all, you didn't earn $1 billion. No one earns $1 billion. You can earn $1 million, and then that $1 million is what earns you 10 million, and that 10 million is what earns you 100 million, and that 100 million can earn you 500 million, and that 500 million might earn you $1 billion. But it's the money that does the earning past a certain point, or it is the capital that earns the money past a certain point. That's why it's called capitalism, because capital is what does the work for you. It's not called working hard-ism or earning-ism. It's called capitalism, because capital is the operative thing in the equation. That's what you need to gain more capital. You need capital. And the more you have, the easier it is to get even more of it.
Right.
Look,
if you've got millions of dollars, you just go buy yourself some treasuries.
Right, boom.
And you're making more than the average person. You don't have to work
the money
a day in
works
your life.
Right. The money earns more than any person could working 60 hours a week.
But you could tell that he was like they're really offended.
They're
like
entitled.
They really feel like, I I did this.
And it's
he's also the douchebag who pulled the Seattle Supersonics out of Seattle.
Oh my God, it all
and
comes
put
down
them
to
in
sports
Oklahoma
for
City.
you,
Well, I'm
doesn't
sorry,
it?
it's important.
I mean, the fact that anybody earns that kind of money, nobody earns that kind of money. Nobody earns that kind of money.
Well, that's a failure of the system.
And here's the thing. I say it all the time. I don't care how rich the rich are. I care how poor the poor are. So if he's that rich, but his lowest wage worker has proportionately moved up with him, then I don't care how rich he is. He could be flying gold-plated airplanes. That's fine with me. If his workers are making a living wage wherever they are and have what they need and don't have to work 3 jobs to be able to feed themselves, I don't care if he's flying around on like whatever fancy shit, right? Like that. So my concern is never with that. I have yet to see in my life anyone live like that hasn't done so on the backs of other people.
That's because it's not really possible, right? If it were, they wouldn't be so paranoid they wouldn't be so paranoid about it. They wouldn't be so defensive about it.
That's Balzac.
Exactly.
Behind every great fortune lays a crime.
They buy our tax code. If you can get to that kind of money without screwing over the environment by paying your fair share of taxes and treating your employees properly, then I would have no problem with it. But you can't. That's the thing. It can't be done. And so that's delusional that these people think somehow they've earned that.
Right. Well, yeah, right. I mean, that's called a utopia, right? And as much as communists and socialists are always accused of being utopian thinkers, right? A world in which the market itself, by itself, truly provides for everybody, that is utopian thinking. That's a fantasy.
It doesn't exist. It only provides for corporate subsidies, and will they get welfare?
Which is why so many people still do not understand and can't wrap their head around the fact that capitalism can only succeed with socialism. You can't have it any other way. And it has been proven time and again in other parts of the world that are much happier, more thriving. Yeah, they may not have as many guns or a military industrial
and they
complex.
do pay more in taxes.
They do. But you know what? Their taxes go where they belong. In our country, most Americans have no clue where the largest chunk of our tax dollars go.
We don't believe our tax dollars really go anywhere.
Well, they do. They go to corporate subsidies. That is the number one thing by a significant margin.
But it's not really our tax dollars going there.
That's true. Well, again, it's all about balancing the budget, and where the value of the dollar maintains is because these corporate megaopolies, they get all of the breaks. And
we need a VAT tax. I know a lot of people like.
Well, it's socialism for the rich. It's capitalism for the rest of us.
That is it's rugged individualism for
right.
Because even then, it's not. You don't have the ability to stop these mega corporations from expanding their portfolio and moving in on territory. They buy off the local elected officials that again, this is the thing about being in commercial real estate. You buy off a local elected official. You make sure that the zoning laws get changed so that way they can build whatever they want in their area. New York City is horrifically guilty of that and has been for many generations.
Oh yeah.
Look at how much different Williamsburg and Greenpoint is now. It's so obvious what the problem is here.
It's capitalism.
When you
That's
get to
what
that
I say.
level,
it's capitalism.
It's never
the problem.
If any, everyone talks about Michael Douglas's Greed is Good speech. It's the speech he gives Charlie Sheen when he's in the office after he finds out he's going to liquidate Blue Star. It is the message of capitalism at its worst form in the best way possible. To fully understand, it's not about bucks, pal. Somebody wins, somebody loses. The rest is just conversation. They really look at the world that way. I made $1 billion this year. Who fucking cares? I'll make $2 billion next year. Oh, does that mean that you guys are going to be out of a job and that you're going to be living on the street?
Although speaking of all this, I am really excited to see the new season of Succession because I am sort of like
I started watching it and it's good. It's good. Yeah. I'm glad you watch it because I've been told by a lot of people that I'm the only one who does.
No, I actually really like it. I got caught into it. I think it's very smart.
It's very good.
It's very dark. And it's a dark comedy in a lot of ways. And so I like that.
Well, it's typical of Adam McKay's stuff where you really feel unlike something like Billions, which is a soap opera.
I haven't watched that.
I watched it and I couldn't watch it because I can't believe in a world where the SEC gives a shit about somebody like the villain of the show. They don't. That guy would be lunching with Paul Giamatti's character.
Well, Succession is based
but Succession with McKay, it feels like whenever he gets into this subject, Big Short, you feel like he knows what he's talking about.
Yeah.
Like he's showing you what these people are like
Nikolai
in the upper 0.001%. In a way that I don't think anyone else captures.
Is that Netflix? Is it Hulu?
That's on
it's
HBO.
a TV show, right?
Okay.
That's HBO.
HBO.
All right, well there you go.
Because I don't watch anything where I'm supposed to watch it.
I don't have time to watch TV, so
I
don't
watch
really
that,
concern
and I
myself
like
with that.
Yellowstone. You know, Yellowstone.
Everybody likes Yellowstone. I refuse to subscribe to what is that, Paramount?
I don't
There you
know.
go.
Again, I get the things.
I
pretty much-
don't know.
Listen,
it's on Paramount.
we pretty much have to do this like once a month or something along.
But I
that
do
line,
like Beth
we
Dutton.
we could obviously keep on talking for hours on end. It's already 11 o'clock.
It's late.
Needless to say, we could probably dive into 3 or 4 more subjects if we tried. But clearly, we have a pretty good chemistry between our 2 shows, and that's really great. And it's really incredible.
Oh my
you guys
God.
are really great people. I don't really.
Well,
like a
you
lot of
guys
people.
always have the same. I feel like whenever I watch you guys, you have generally the same takes that I would have on things, and I don't find that many people where it's consistent like that. Where I'm like, yeah, I think that way too.
No, we have to, but that's where the strength in numbers comes from. You know, our audience meets yours, vice versa, and even if you're not going to agree on everything, that's okay. Because the core principles of what we're fighting for, which is obviously through a labor movement that can't be stopped. It's been done before. It just has to find its way again.
Right.
We have to use technology for the right things, not trying to get into fights on Twitter or comment on every post on Facebook and Instagram. We have to be using these things for what they're meant for, which is how do we bring more and more people together? Yeah, we're suppressed. It's going to happen.
Well, and also, it like the medium, it does not lend itself to subtlety and nuance. And
Thank you.
I think that's a big part of what's destroying our civilization. It's so many of the things that are killing us are a result of our biological evolutionary inheritance being turned against itself, because sugar is very hard to get in the wild. So we like it a lot because it's hard to get. Now we've made it available on demand, so we're killing ourselves with it. It's the same thing with our
Technology.
media. It's the same thing with our technology. Yeah. We, as a social primate species, we are biologically inclined to pay very close attention to threats. So we've developed this entire media, this entire social media that is built around playing on the human impulse to pay attention to the enemy, the threat, the enemy, the threat.
Always one.
Constantly. Oh, the MAGA people over here, or the liberals over here, right? The leftists over here. And it's destroying our civilization.
Yeah, this is why I'm not on social media, you guys, because it's the people are too mean.
Yeah, we do our parts and we just go.
Yeah, I tried to tag you when I tweeted this out. And I'm like, we're Jen. I'm putting in Jen. I'm like,
our show, like we're on social media as a platform, but it's him.
I'm also like, I literally have been doing a little bit of work. I'm not kidding. I've had a whale of a day.
Yes,
we all have.
So, I don't do social media anymore because they're too mean.
Yes, and
that's really why I don't need that shit in my headspace. You know what? If somebody wants to have a constructive discussion with me, they can always email, and I'll always I'll even talk to people on the phone if you want to have a nice discussion. But the problem of what Russ was just saying, the nuance thing, is a big friggin' problem. And people will always take whatever they think is the worst possible way to use something that you say against you, because people are inclined to constantly want to be friggin' fighting. Yep. And I just don't.
Have you guys talked with Steve Grumbine?
No.
Okay.
I know he does the real progressive stuff, right?
Yes. Anything.
He's an MMT guy.
Yeah. We need more of the conversation regarding how we're going to help people better understand economics and how the monetary system really works, and why the rich are able to get away with what they get away with, and why we get nothing. And it's pretty obvious why that is the case.
We need people to understand MMT.
Yeah, we need to be, like I said, people need to check their egos at the door. There are people that you guys I know hang out with and stuff. They don't like us. That's okay. There's plenty of other people out there that we can rub elbows with, that we can formulate these relationships with, that understand the mission here. This is not about, oh, I want to have the biggest show.
I don't understand why people hate on me so much.
Because you're a bitch. That's why.
Well,
Damn.
I can understand why people. I can understand why I might like people might not
Cancel that motherfucker.
I will say this. Of the Wasserman Schultz Mean Girls that are down here, there was one in particular that
There are
I
some
can
mean
easily
girls down
say
here.
what is. It turns out that she was mentally ill.
Girls are
But
so
the,
mean.
But the point is, like, this girl was like stalking me and harassing me.
Yeah.
And then eventually, I ran into her at an event.
In person.
She didn't know
that's
what
terrible.
to do.
Because
She
it's so easy
literally-
online.
She put her head down. She didn't know. She couldn't look at me. It's amazing what people will do on social media
Right.
that they would never
Oh,
do.
yeah.
And that's what I say. Like, if you would like to say that to me, really, I'd love it for you to come and say that. But none of these people would, because they don't have any courage of what they're thinking. They don't stand for anything. They just want to be fighting. They just want to be hating and fighting and finding things wrong. It's like, if I am the worst person that you have to be picking fight, like if I'm the person that you're directing your anger at, you've run out of ideas, man.
Oh, a lot of people have.
Because I am not in the power position. Like, why would you hate on me so much?
Well,
It's weird.
There's also
Get a
again,
life.
Russ, it's like you said. There is a huge element of human jealousy that a lot of people really don't want to talk about. That there is a lot of that cutting off your nose to spite your face crap.
And girls
that
are
goes
mean.
on. Girls, us guys, yeah, we don't.
It's true. I don't know if you guys know that,
we
but
don't-
girls
we
are
don't,
mean.
We don't dabble in that shit.
I mean, guys have their own way of going about it.
That's true.
Guy, I find the guys that I argue with, they might as well be women. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's another story.
They've so
Really?
absorbed that ethos. There's a whole other conversation, but I posted.
Well,
the
that's
other-
like
yeah.
when my 22-year-old like hears somebody and he's like, "Oh, I want to punch him in his vagina."
Yeah.
That's the kind of stuff that I hear in my head, and it's just, oh, thank you, Lisa. And it's totally not politically correct, but I brought my son to a Broward Young Democrats meeting once, and my son's not involved in politics. He can't stand any of this crap, and he was listening to somebody talk who we just know is so like, and my son didn't know that. And that's what he turned to me and said. He goes, "Oh, his voice, he makes me want to." And I'm like, I just started cracking up.
And he's not gay. Like,
No.
Yeah,
This has
it's not about that.
No.
No,
you know what I'm talking. No, it's somebody who needs to have their ass kicked, is what it is. It has nothing to do with gender or
Sissy
sexual
boy.
orientation. It is just somebody who just needs to have their ass kicked.
It's really.
You know what I'm talking about,
yeah,
right, Russell?
It has become. It has become a social. It's become a social club.
Because you're my age.
I mean,
right?
I mean,
You're my age.
it's part of the problem with the left. I posted this the other day, and it set off a few people. I said the people who are obsessed with their own victimhood are never going to defeat people who embrace the martial virtues of discipline and self-sacrifice. And that's why we're on the verge of a fascist takeover.
Yes.
We've said this on the show before, man. I whenever I see the January 6th people, I always quote Colonel Kurtz in Apocalypse Now when he's talking about the Viet Cong and what they're willing to do. He goes, "Give me 2 divisions of such men and our problems here would be over very quickly." I look at the January 6th people, I say, give me a left with that kind of balls.
Yes.
And our problems in this country will be over very quickly.
That's what I was saying. Like, imagine if that was that, like that. Yeah, that is exactly. That's what I feel like I'm trying. That's what I want to do. Like, that's where I like. That's what I kind of want. I'm not.
We used to have a left like that.
Of a violent breaking into a building. I'm not talking about that.
And yet, somehow, some way, Debbie Wasserman Schultz is still in Congress.
Why does it always come back to her?
Because I think that's in my humble opinion, it's a gaping wound that for what we've gone through will never be healed properly until she's gone.
Thanks, Danny.
And I think that's something where there are exceptions to the rule with certain people that are in elected office as of today, and she is at the very top. And if that's not enough, she is as guilty of insider trading as anybody on that hill. She breaks the law all the time with complete impunity, like anybody.
A lot of them do. She's just particularly bad.
Thank you so much, Danny. Really appreciate it.
All right, get this trending. Keaton, what's your description for Debbie Wasserman Schultz?
Oh, well, Matt Taibbi actually quoted it back to me when we interviewed him, which I was very surprised that A, he remembered, and B, he was willing to quote it back. But I believe I called her a raisin-faced, snake-haired, Medusa-looking something. I forget what the noun at the end of that was. But she looks like Medusa. She really does. And I was
very
shocked.
reptilian looking.
Very reptilian. And I was very surprised that Matt quoted that back to me because, you know, like making fun of women's looks is considered somewhat cancelable offense. So I think he might not want to do it, but I guess he doesn't care much.
Well, that's what I said. You said that on the show, and I said he's already canceled.
Well, yeah, he's already kind of canceled.
By the kind of people who cancel you, he's already canceled.
I don't know who you're referring to, Jen, when you mentioned, you know, the mean girls who were, you know, hating on you and giving you a hard time. But I mean, you know, it's our brand on our show that we will pretty much talk to anybody. Like we're not going to
we are too
to shut people out.
We always were too until people came on and were just so nasty and rude and disrespectful on us that I'm like, I'm not going to be spoken to this way by people. And that is the only time that I've ever been like, yeah, no, that's not okay. I'm not about that.
Well, that was done. Well, that was done deliberately.
No, but there's a lot of mean girls locally here. And it's really like this very cliquey, look, I mean, it's a girl thing. It just is. It's just like, there are certain things that are very mean things that men wouldn't even think of. That you wouldn't even think that somebody would do. Like there's been things that come up and I'm like, oh, this is this. And he's like, really? I'm like, oh yeah, this is where her head's at. And it takes crazy to know crazy. That's all I can tell you. And
You're
I'm
crazy?
just, what I mean is that, yeah, we recognize, yes, there are things that women do that are extremely mean.
There is no connection between sex and gender expression. What are you talking about?
Whoa.
Get in the camp.
I was at an event this weekend where there was a guy who was wearing, I'm telling you right now, you would think it was a Third Reich hat that he was wearing. It looked so like goose stepping. Like I was like, wow, why would you wear a hat like that? Now, of course, it had nothing to do with that, but it just the shape of it and everything. It was like something out of the
I'm
1940s.
Not always politically correct. That's just not. No. I'm too old for that shit. Russell, you and we've talked about this. Like I don't have it.
Xers. Well, you remember Fox News tried to drum up this thing that the Xers have to save society from the wokes, and the memes were hilarious. People were just dropping memes like, "Have you met us?
Yeah,
we're the last people you should be."
Well, that's maybe that's why Russell and I make a good team, because I feel like perhaps my sense of humor and my just overall outlook is probably more Gen X than millennial.
How old are you, Keaton?
I'm 36, so I'm a millennial, but I'm a bit of an old soul in that way. And like, I was politically conscious before a lot of my friends were. So like, when I was a teenager, I was kind of thinking it like a 30-year-old, basically. You know what I mean? And that's where the Gen Xers were at that time. They would have been 30 at around that time. And so I think it probably gave me, like, I was never a PC person, you know. I was never interested in that. That was always a major turnoff because it's so boring, you know. Like, why would you ever want to censor yourself, right? I mean, there's always going to be people out there trying to shut you up. Why would you want to shut yourself up? It's just not fun, right? It's not an interesting way to live, to like police your own thoughts and your own words. You know, why do it?
Not ever as capable of thinking outside of the paper bag generally. Like, I feel like people like Russell and I, when shit went down when we were kids and we were out doing what we're doing, there was no cell phone to call your mom. There was no, like, we all had to just figure shit out. And it was somewhat Lord of the Flies. And there was
it's hard for me to imagine growing up in a world where your parents just don't tell you come back at dinner.
Right.
And then you just go live Lord of the Flies out in the neighborhood. And you get in your little Wonder Years adventures out there.
Yeah.
And, you know, then my mother used to whistle out the window.
I had to be home when the street lights came on.
There was, you know, I mean, I grew up in a neighborhood that was very Italian inflected. So there was a lot of, Danny, get back here now. There was a lot of that.
So,
right around dinner time, you would hear all the parents yelling out the windows.
In the Jewish hood, it wasn't that different.
Yeah.
I lived in the second largest Jewish ghetto, we used to call it, in the country at the time. North Miami Beach was only next to Brooklyn in terms of per capita Jews.
Yeah, makes sense.
And so, like, I grew up, everybody was Jewish. Everybody, like, I honestly, until I went to college, I knew that wasn't the case, but I hadn't lived that experience until I went to college.
All right, Jen, you'll appreciate this as one of the chosen people. All right, so I ultimately got kicked out of Hebrew school. And it was because of a string of incidents like this. So I grew up in an Italian neighborhood. All my friends were Italian. None of my friends were Jewish. My friends were all Italian.
Right.
So they do a lot of Zionist indoctrinating in Hebrew school. I'm sure they still do that today. And so they were talking about how the Messiah is going to come and he's going to bring all the Jews back to Israel. And so, all my friends are Italian. So I'm like, well, what if I don't want to go to Israel? And they go, no, the Messiah is going to come and all the good Jewish boys and girls are going to go to Israel. And I thought about it. I said, I don't want to go to Israel. And she was like, fine, Russell. All the other Jews will go to Israel. You can stay here.
I don't know. It's a little blind faith. Too much to ask.
Yeah.
One of my friends is a Jewish guy, half Jewish as I am, and we weren't great friends at the time. This is how I knew I was going to be great friends. It turns out he's like one of my best friends to this day. He would just hang out at our lunch table, and there was an Italian kid who would sometimes rag on us for being Jewish and stuff like that. And we grew up in a very diverse school district, but it was around Easter weekend, around when it is now, and the Passion of the Christ movie had just come out, and this Roman Catholic sort of like little Italian kid, he starts ragging on this guy who would later become like one of my best friends, and he says, I saw the Passion of the Christ this weekend and it was just terrible. How could your people do that to Jesus Christ? How could you do that? He says, I watched it 2.5 hours. You're torturing this man. How could you do that to him? And this guy, he gave one of the funniest comebacks I've ever heard. He said, it seemed like a good idea at the time. It's the best comeback line. He just thought of it. Seemed like a good idea at the time.
How can people find your work? How can they get involved?
Everyone knows how to find.
Well, they don't necessarily know.
Yeah, go to YouTube. Just type in Do Dissidence on YouTube. You can find us on Rumble. DoDissidence.com. Our friend and fan, actually, one of our fans, just sort of took it upon himself to redo our website for us. His name is Jacob, and he did an amazing job. So you can go to DoDissidence.com and find us on Substack as well. But the quickest and easiest is, just put us into the YouTube search. Once you're done watching this video, just put Do Dissidence in and see what we got over there. And it's always a pleasure talking to you guys. Thank you.
I like
for
you
having
guys.
us.
Thank you very much, guys. A lot of fun.
Keep kicking ass and taking names, and we will be on your show, I'm sure, at some point. You guys will be back here soon.
Thanks,
Yeah, I'm putting together, we want to put together like a Florida super panel for when Tiny D enters the race. So I'm thinking you guys will be great for that. And that's going to be coming up pretty soon.
At some point, yeah. And I was thinking you guys will definitely have to come to our Festivus this year. We do an annual Festivus, and everybody comes and we do the airing of grievances.
All right. Well, Extra Bulla, who we're running for president, has his own Festivus show, so I'll have to make a tour of Festivus shows. I'll pop in a couple different Festivus shows. Yeah.
Vote
Thank
Extra Bulla.
Yeah, exactly.
Thanks, gentlemen.
All right. Thank you, guys. Good to see you again.
Thank you very much, guys.
Anytime.
That's fun.
So that was fun. And of course,
Always
as
fun.
I've alluded to, we could end up talking to them for 5 hours if we really wanted to. But that's the importance of these conversations, because it brings more people into the fold that want to see what we're talking about. And just by happenstance, I mean, the numbers will end up being probably pretty good tonight. So for those of you who are here and that may be new, please go to patreon.com/generational exchange for as little as $5 a month. Become a wonderful supporter of our small but mighty channel.
We're small but mighty.
We have been growing quite a bit as of late. We want to keep the momentum going and keep you guys entertained and engaged. So if you are feeling a little bit more generous, for $10 a month, you can get yourself not just the Lulu sticker, which is obviously great.
Look how cute she
but
is.
also the
You get yourself mention parliamentarian, guys.
parliamentarian.
I'm not kidding you. This is my pick for 24. When people ask me who I think should run for the Democrats, I'm going with Manchin and parliamentarian.
Probably the best shot they got right now.
Not to mention, think about the flexibility of that, since none of us know the parliamentarian's name and it could change. It doesn't really matter. It could be anybody you want, really.
And if you are feeling super generous, for as $25 a month, you can get yourself the Tri-Blend Generational Change t-shirt. You know you want it. You love it. It's really awesome. Really incredible. Tremendous people. They're really great. And so
we're going to start. I'm going to get some more purple shirts so that we have more of these.
But Keaton and Russ are definitely, they're Osiris, they're Steve Grumbine. You know, we have, like a core of people that we cross collaborate with. Jordan Chariton, Zayna Day. We have our people.
We have our people.
And there's plenty of others. I'm not thinking about them right now. Forgive me. I'm tired. It is late, but this has been.
But the truth is I do talk to anybody. Well, now I can't go back on the Michael Knowles show, because now that's a line too far for me.
If Michael Knowles was just being somewhat reasonable and once in a while would dive into the topic of the trans issue that he thinks is really important because the kids must be protected, this is all he talks about. This is like
But that's a lot of people that only seem to be focused on that. It's annoying.
But again, why are they doing it? Because it's getting clicks, it's getting views, it's getting money. And that's what most of them do it for. They do it for money. They don't do it for principle. They could claim that they're principled, but the fact is, it's a well-paying gig, especially.
But you know what? When you cross over, and here's the thing, I'm actually, and everyone knows this, like I'm unabashedly First Amendment, and I don't even have a problem with people making hate speech. I really don't. You can say whatever hateful crap you want to say. That's not a thing. But I choose to not affiliate with hateful people and to affiliate around that because I just don't want to. But I support their right to say hateful things. You can say whatever hateful crap you want.
We need to schedule next Wednesday. Not ready with that yet. Looks like we got to get people on the schedule.
You are welcome, Danny.
Next Monday, we are going to have Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett will be joining us.
And I'm going to have a I remember you when moment. Not really, but it's just kind of funny because we've had her on the show when she was the state rep that was leading like a revolution in Texas, which was really cool. That brought her to my attention.
You're very welcome, Danny. Thank you for your amazing support.
Absolutely.
Really so yeah, we will obviously plan the schedule out. I just passed my 45-hour post-licensing course in real estate. It was very important. I got this out of the way. Now I really don't have to worry about any of that stuff again. So a little weight off my shoulders. I will be traveling to New Jersey, but that will be next Thursday. So I will only be out of the studio on the following Monday. So
it's news to me.
Yes. Well, it's news and you've just found out. So there you go. So thank you guys for your amazing support. Really appreciate it. It's been a great show. Get it out there. Like and subscribe, share, comment, do all those wonderful things that we appreciate you very much for. Have a great rest of your week. Remember, tomorrow night, the Gen Z Report, episode 2, 9 p.m. Be there or be square.
Actually, and I'll be right here. I'll be here for that tomorrow night because we're having a couple people that are not going to be in studio. So I'm going to be there.
We'll work on that. We'll have a little talk about not showing up.
But we will be having CJ and Braden, and we have some really good stuff to talk about. The kids wanted, I have to stop calling them the kids, but to me, they're kids, guys. I'm sorry, but they are. So sorry, if you're young enough to be my kid, you're a kid. So the focus tomorrow night is going to be on basically financial literacy for Generation Z.
Yeah, they really should have somebody from MMT come on.
Yeah, well, and I was thinking like that at some point it'd be nice to introduce Steve to our little group and have him talk to them. But it's going to be really interesting. We're talking about some things, and Braden specifically going to be talking about affordable housing.
That'll be fun. Thank you so much, guys, and I will see you all next week.